Hola y bienvenidos a Documental para Dormir, donde la curiosidad camina con calma y la ciencia se trata menos de ecuaciones complejas y más de un asombro sutil. El experimento mental de esta noche es uno que se hunde en lugar de elevarse. Nos invita a no mirar las estrellas ni el horizonte, sino a dirigir nuestra atención hacia abajo, bajo la tierra, bajo la piedra y hacia los espacios ocultos del planeta que llamamos hogar. ¿Qué pasaría si la primera civilización, no solo un puñado de personas escondiéndose de las tormentas, sino una sociedad en el verdadero sentido de la palabra, no viviera en la superficie en absoluto? ¿Y si estuviera bajo tierra? La idea suena como algo de una vieja novela de aventuras, o tal vez el tipo de cuento que escucharías susurrar a altas horas de la noche cuando las luces están tenues y la imaginación está a flor de piel. Y, sin embargo, es una pregunta que se queda, ¿verdad? Porque bajo nuestros pies hay mucho más espacio que sobre nuestras cabezas. Hablamos tan a menudo sobre la inmensidad del cielo, pero la tierra misma se extiende hacia abajo en capas que rara vez vemos. Y dentro de esas capas, ¿sería posible que la vida humana, organizada y duradera, alguna vez se asentara allí? Antes de profundizar en esa línea de pensamiento, déjame preguntarte algo. ¿Desde dónde estás escuchando ahora mismo? ¿Estás en un apartamento de la ciudad con el ruido apagado del tráfico afuera? ¿Estás en una casa tranquila donde el único ruido es el zumbido de un electrodoméstico? Tal vez ya estés tumbado en algún lugar oscuro, con los ojos cerrados, dejando que las palabras fluyan. Donde quiera que estés, imagina esto. Debajo de ti, no solo roca y tierra, sino pasadizos, cámaras, redes enteras de espacio, donde una vez resonaron pasos, donde una vez parpadearon antorchas, donde se transmitieron voces en idiomas olvidados hace mucho tiempo. Y si este vagabundeo te resulta relajante, o quizás simplemente una agradable distracción del ritmo del día, te agradecería que le dieras a me gusta, te suscribieras o compartieras este pequeño remanso de calma con alguien más, porque cuantas más personas encuentren estos viajes tranquilos, más podremos seguir haciéndolos. Así que, empecemos no con una afirmación, sino con curiosidad, porque las civilizaciones subterráneas, ya sean reales, imaginarias o simbólicas, siempre nos han fascinado. Recuerda la primera vez que viste la entrada de una cueva. Quizás no en persona, pero sí en una imagen o incluso en una caricatura. Se siente diferente a un claro del bosque o a una playa. Las cuevas te llaman a tu interior. Se sienten como puertas a otro mundo, más oscuro, más tranquilo, casi atemporal, y los seres humanos siempre han respondido a esa llamada. Hace decenas de miles de años, nuestros antepasados no solo usaban las cuevas como refugios temporales, las decoraban. Pintaban paredes en su interior con animales, símbolos y escenas de sus vidas. Estos no eran actos de personas que simplemente se escondían de la lluvia, eran ceremonias de pertenencia. El subsuelo no era solo un lugar para esperar a que pasara el mal tiempo, era un lugar que se sentía significativo, casi sagrado. Y no era solo arte, y los primeros humanos almacenaban comida en pozos, excavaban en la tierra, mantenían el agua fresca en cámaras de piedra y enterraban a sus muertos bajo tierra. En cierto sentido, nuestra relación con el subsuelo es tan antigua como la civilización misma. Siempre hemos confiado en él para guardar cosas para nosotros, nuestras cosechas, nuestros recuerdos, nuestros antepasados. Pero ¿qué pasaría si, en lugar de simplemente almacenar y decorar, la gente decidiera quedarse allí? No por una noche ni por una temporada, sino por generaciones. ¿Qué pasaría si una comunidad entera decidiera que la superficie no era fiable y que la verdadera promesa de seguridad y estabilidad se encontraba debajo? Imagina despertar no con la luz del sol, sino con el resplandor del fuego contra las paredes de piedra. Imagina crecer sin horizonte, tu sentido del espacio medido por la anchura de una caverna, tu sentido del tiempo medido por rutinas en lugar del amanecer y el anochecer. Para nosotros se siente antinatural, pero para una comunidad nacida y criada allí, sería normal, sería su hogar. Esto no es tan extraño como podría parecer. Hay lugares en el mundo donde la gente ya ha vivido parcialmente bajo tierra durante siglos. En los desiertos de Irán, pueblos enteros dependían antaño de acueductos y almacenes subterráneos. En la región de Capadocia, En Turquía se han descubierto vastas ciudades subterráneas, excavadas en roca volcánica blanda. Algunas eran lo suficientemente grandes como para albergar a miles de personas. No eran fantasías. Eran respuestas reales al peligro, al clima, a la guerra. Pero, ¿y si no se tratara solo de una estrategia de supervivencia posterior? ¿Y si, desde el principio, el primer intento de civilización de la humanidad hubiera comenzado allí, no arriba? Piensen en las ventajas: protección contra el clima, aislamiento del calor y el frío, ocultamiento de depredadores y grupos hostiles. La superficie está expuesta, es impredecible y a menudo peligrosa. Bajo tierra las cosas cambian lentamente. Las temperaturas son estables, hay tranquilidad, hay seguridad. Para un grupo que intentaba sobrevivir lo suficiente como para convertirse en algo más que familias dispersas, la tierra misma habría parecido el mejor techo de todos. Por supuesto, esto plantea la pregunta práctica: comida, agua, energía. ¿Cómo se las arreglarían? Una cosa es esconderse en cuevas y otra prosperar allí. Pero la naturaleza nos da ejemplos de que no es imposible. Los hongos crecen sin luz solar, alimentándose de materia en descomposición. Ciertos peces e insectos viven toda su vida en cavernas oscuras. Las bacterias prosperan en entornos subterráneos, profundos, extrayendo energía de sustancias químicas en lugar de luz. El agua se filtra por las grietas de la roca, acumulándose en ríos y acuíferos subterráneos. Si la gente aprendiera a aprovechar estos recursos para cultivar hongos, a pescar peces cavernícolas, a usar el fuego no solo para calentarse, sino también para cocinar y alumbrarse, podrían haber construido toda una cultura allá abajo. Piensen en los niños criados en un entorno así. Para ellos, el sol sería un rumor, quizás aterrador. El cielo, infinito y abierto, podría sentirse menos seguro que los techos de piedra y los muros predecibles. Sus mitos podrían no hablar de dioses en lo alto, sino de peligros acechando en lo alto, esperando castigar a cualquiera que se acercara demasiado a la superficie. Y no es solo la supervivencia lo que podría suceder bajo tierra, es la cultura. Las voces se transmiten de forma diferente en los pasillos de piedra. Música, cánticos, rituales, todo resonaría y llenaría el aire de formas que las sociedades de la superficie no podrían igualar. Sus historias estarían iluminadas no por la luz de las estrellas, sino por antorchas parpadeantes, sombras danzando en las paredes como ilustraciones vivientes. Entonces, ¿por qué no hemos encontrado evidencia innegable de tal civilización? Quizás porque la evidencia subterránea no dura de la misma manera. Los túneles se derrumban, las cámaras se inundan, los sedimentos se entierran y borran. Las ruinas superficiales pueden ser descubiertas por el viento, la arena o el tiempo. Las ruinas subterráneas pueden estar selladas para siempre, atrapadas bajo desprendimientos de rocas, indistinguibles de las formaciones naturales. Si una sociedad entera prosperó una vez bajo nosotros, la tierra misma puede haber ocultado sus rastros. Y, sin embargo, la idea no nos abandona. Una y otra vez, los mitos y las leyendas regresan a ella. Historias de Agartha, de Shambhala, de la tierra hueca, cuentos de reinos ocultos, de paz o de peligro muy por debajo. Tal vez no sean más que imaginación humana, pero la repetición a través de las culturas sugiere algo más profundo. Tal vez no sea que hubiera un imperio subterráneo literal. Tal vez sea que todos, en algún nivel, sentimos la atracción del subsuelo. Sentimos que la vida allí no solo es posible, sino en cierto modo inevitable. Incluso la ciencia moderna alimenta esa sensación. Cuando los investigadores exploran cuevas profundas, a menudo encuentran vida donde no esperan ninguna. Microbios sobreviviendo en la oscuridad, insectos extraños adaptados a la oscuridad total, ecosistemas únicos que prosperan sin luz solar. Cada descubrimiento parece susurrar lo mismo. La vida no necesita el cielo, puede arreglárselas con mucho menos. Y por eso no es difícil llevar la imaginación un paso más allá. Quizás nuestra primera civilización verdadera no fue un conjunto de chozas bajo el sol, sino una red de cámaras bajo él. Quizás nuestra historia no comienza con el cielo sobre nosotros, sino con piedras a nuestro alrededor. Hay cierta humildad en esa idea, ¿verdad? Tendemos a pensar en nosotros mismos como criaturas de luz. Apreciamos las estrellas, construimos torres, escalamos montañas, pero tal vez nuestros comienzos fueron más oscuros, más silenciosos, más ocultos. Y si eso es cierto, entonces, incluso al mirar hacia afuera, siempre llevamos con nosotros algo de ese pasado oculto. Esta reflexión no tiene por qué terminar aquí. No es una conclusión, sino una apertura. Profundizaremos en por qué los humanos imaginamos mundos ocultos, cómo los mitos de reinos subterráneos nos han moldeado y qué ha descubierto la ciencia sobre la vida subterránea. Porque la pregunta no es solo si existió tal civilización, sino por qué la idea sigue siendo tan importante. Si la idea de una civilización bajo nuestros pies nos resulta natural, vale la pena detenerse a preguntarnos por qué. ¿Por qué los seres humanos siguen inventando historias sobre mundos ocultos, sobre reinos que existen casi invisibles, en las profundidades de cuevas o bajo montañas? ¿Por qué nos resulta más fácil creer en la posibilidad de una ciudad perdida bajo tierra que, por ejemplo, en una ciudad perdida flotando en el cielo? Parece que nuestra imaginación siempre ha tenido una relación especial con los espacios que tenemos debajo, una fascinación que se remonta a la historia escrita y probablemente a mucho antes. Parte de la respuesta es simple. El subsuelo es misterioso. Durante la mayor parte de la existencia humana, el mundo superficial ya era bastante peligroso, lleno de depredadores, tormentas, tribus rivales y cambios impredecibles en el entorno. Pero al menos se podía ver la superficie, se podía escudriñar el cielo en busca de nubes, el horizonte en busca de movimiento. El subsuelo, en cambio, era incognoscible. Entras en una cueva y la luz se desvanece. Las sombras engullen tu sentido de la orientación. Un solo giro puede dejarte desorientado. Para los primeros humanos, esto no solo era inquietante, era aterrador y, sin embargo, el miedo a menudo alimenta la imaginación. Cuando no podemos ver lo que hay allí, llenamos la oscuridad de historias. Piensa en la primera persona que entró en una cueva llevando solo una rama ardiendo. Cada destello de llama habría revelado formas extrañas en las paredes, ecos extraños que rebotaban en la cámara, movimientos que podrían haber sido murciélagos o simplemente ilusiones de sombras. Habría sido natural creer que algo vivía allí, algo invisible, algo más antiguo y sabio, o quizás más peligroso, que las personas que se atrevieron a entrar. De ese miedo y asombro surgieron historias, y las historias son poderosas. Una vez contadas, se quedan grabadas. Si imaginas espíritus o dioses en las profundidades, la cueva se convierte en algo más que una roca. Se convierte en un portal, se convierte en la entrada a otro mundo. Los niños escuchan esas historias y las repiten. La idea se extiende, reforzada no solo por el misterio de las cuevas, sino por los sentimientos que provocan en cada generación. Los psicólogos suelen señalar que los humanos somos criaturas buscadoras de patrones. No nos gustan los espacios vacíos en nuestro conocimiento. Cuando encontramos vacíos, los llenamos con narrativa. El subsuelo es el vacío definitivo. Oculta todo a la vista. Solo podemos ver hasta donde alcanza la llama. Más allá de eso, es desconocido. Y lo desconocido rara vez permanece vacío en la mente humana. Se puebla de sociedades imaginarias, monstruos, ancestros o seres divinos. Pero no es solo miedo. El subsuelo también promete algo diferente: seguridad. Sabemos por descubrimientos arqueológicos que las cuevas ofrecían refugio de tormentas, depredadores e incluso grupos enemigos. Una cueva se puede defender más fácilmente que un campo abierto. Es un espacio cerrado, estable y predecible. Esta combinación de miedo y seguridad hace que el subsuelo sea extrañamente magnético. Es a la vez amenazante y reconfortante. Un lugar de terror y un refugio a la vez. No es de extrañar que nuestra imaginación se quede allí. Culturas de todo el mundo han creado mitos que describen mundos enteros bajo la superficie. En la mitología griega, el inframundo no era solo un pozo sombrío, sino un reino organizado con gobernantes, ríos y regiones. Los mayas contaban historias de Xibalba, un vasto dominio subterráneo donde las pruebas aguardaban a las almas de los muertos. En las tradiciones nórdicas existían mundos ocultos bajo las raíces del árbol del mundo. En las leyendas budistas e hindúes hay referencias a Arturo o Shambhala, ciudades de sabiduría ocultas bajo las montañas, esperando el momento oportuno para revelarse. Estas historias varían en detalles, pero el tema es constante. El subsuelo no está vacío, está lleno de significado. La pregunta es, ¿por qué las mentes humanas de geografías y épocas tan diferentes convergían en ideas tan similares? Algunos estudiosos argumentan que es simplemente un reflejo de las prácticas funerarias. Cuando enterramos a nuestros muertos, creamos una asociación entre el subsuelo y el más allá. La tierra recibe el cuerpo, por lo que también debe ser la puerta a algo más allá. Una vez establecido ese vínculo, se convierte en terreno fértil para la creación de mitos. El subsuelo no es solo donde descansan los cuerpos, es donde viajan las almas, donde viven los dioses, donde las civilizaciones podrían prosperar lejos de nuestra vista. Pero quizás haya más. Cuando vives completamente expuesto a los elementos, la idea de un lugar estable y oculto resulta atractiva. Si has perdido cosechas por las tormentas o has visto a depredadores atacar desde la intemperie, la fantasía de un mundo seguro y cerrado bajo tus pies es reconfortante. Los mitos de mundos ocultos podrían tener menos que ver con la muerte y más con el anhelo de seguridad. Pueden ser expresiones colectivas del deseo de retirarse del caos y vivir en un lugar donde los peligros no puedan alcanzar. También está la cuestión del descubrimiento. La historia de la humanidad está llena de momentos en los que la gente se topó con cuevas llenas de extrañas formaciones, estalactitas y estalagmitas que parecen cascadas congeladas, minerales que brillan a la luz, cámaras tan grandes que parecen catedrales. Imagina entrar en un lugar así sin ningún marco científico que lo explique. Se sentiría de otro mundo. Por supuesto, creerías que es obra de dioses o el hogar de seres, diferentes a ti. Civilizaciones enteras imaginadas podrían surgir de esa única experiencia. Y luego está la memoria. Muchas culturas transmiten historias oralmente, reformulándolas con cada generación. Una historia sobre esconderse en cuevas durante una tormenta podría convertirse, con el paso de los siglos, en la historia de antepasados que vivieron completamente bajo tierra. Las pequeñas verdades se expanden hasta convertirse en mitos. Con el tiempo, cobran vida propia, desvinculadas del evento práctico que las originó. Para cuando nos llegan, traen consigo temas de reinos ocultos y pueblos misteriosos, muy alejados de su contexto original. La psicología moderna añade otra dimensión a esto. Nos atraen las dualidades, nos gusta imaginar opuestos, luz y oscuridad, cielo e infierno, superficie y subsuelo. Estos contrastes nos ayudan a organizar el mundo en nuestra mente. Cuando pensamos en el cielo como el reino de los dioses o los antepasados, lo equilibramos naturalmente con un inframundo. Un reino arriba, otro abajo. Esta simetría apela a nuestro sentido del orden. Así que, incluso si ninguna civilización vivió realmente bajo tierra, la idea cumple una función simbólica. Equilibra las historias que nos contamos sobre la existencia. Consideremos también el papel de la imaginación infantil. Los niños suelen soñar con lugares secretos, fuertes, escondites, guaridas y túneles. El subsuelo se convierte naturalmente en un lienzo para estas fantasías. Incluso jugando, parecemos inclinados a imaginar cómo sería vivir bajo tierra. Quizás este instinto infantil sea un leve eco de algo más antiguo, una característica de supervivencia transmitida por antepasados que encontraron seguridad bajo tierra. Tampoco podemos ignorar el papel de la literatura y, posteriormente, de la ciencia ficción. Desde el viaje de Julio Verne al centro de la Tierra hasta las películas y los videojuegos modernos, hemos seguido alimentando la idea de que el subsuelo no está vacío, sino poblado. Cada nueva historia añade una nueva capa a nuestro imaginario cultural. A estas alturas, la civilización subterránea se ha convertido casi en un género propio, un motivo recurrente que reconocemos, aunque no lo creamos literalmente. Pero la creencia es algo escurridizo. Aunque mucha gente descarta las teorías de la tierra hueca o los mitos de Agartha por fantasiosos, aún perduran, siguen atrayendo interés. Quizás se deba a que, en el fondo, sabemos lo poco que hemos explorado realmente bajo tierra. Hemos cartografiado la superficie de Marte con mayor profundidad que las cuevas más profundas de nuestro planeta. Cuando tanto permanece oculto, la imaginación llena los vacíos. Los mundos ocultos siguen siendo posibles, si no probables. La geología también contribuye a sustentar estas ideas. Los sumideros aparecen de repente, engullendo edificios y carreteras. Los tubos de lava se extienden kilómetros, formando túneles prefabricados. Los ríos subterráneos excavan pasajes que los humanos solo encuentran por casualidad. Cada vez que descubrimos una característica así, nos recuerda que la Tierra está llena de sorpresas, que siempre podría haber más escondido bajo tierra. En ese sentido, los mitos de civilizaciones ocultas no son del todo irracionales. Son extensiones de experiencias reales de descubrimiento de vastos e inesperados espacios subterráneos. Otra razón por la que imaginamos mundos ocultos es la atracción humana por el secreto. Nos fascina la idea de que algo exista justo a nuestro lado, inadvertido. Es el mismo impulso que hace que los pasadizos secretos de los castillos o las habitaciones ocultas de las casas sean tan atractivos. El subsuelo es el secreto supremo. Se encuentra literalmente bajo tierra, ignorado en la vida cotidiana, pero lo suficientemente vasto como para ocultar casi cualquier cosa. Imaginar una civilización allí es entregarse a la fantasía de secretos a gran escala. No olvidemos cómo el subsuelo moldea nuestras emociones. Pasa unos minutos en una cueva oscura y tu mente empieza a jugarte una mala pasada. Los sonidos resuenan de forma extraña. El tiempo se siente diferente. Sin sol, se pierde la noción del tiempo. Esta distorsión de la percepción hace que las cuevas parezcan realidades separadas. Al emerger de nuevo a la luz, es como cruzar entre mundos. No cuesta mucho imaginar que alguien podría quedarse al otro lado, sin regresar jamás, construyendo un mundo que se siente completamente distinto. Incluso el lenguaje refleja nuestra fascinación. Hablamos de ir bajo tierra cuando nos escondemos. Llamamos subterráneos a los movimientos secretos. Describimos la cultura oculta como una escena subterránea. La metáfora está en todas partes. Demuestra que asociamos instintivamente lo oculto, lo diferente o lo alternativo con lo que hay debajo. Esta asociación constante no hace más que reforzar el atractivo de imaginar sociedades completas viviendo bajo tierra. Entonces, ¿por qué imaginamos mundos ocultos? Porque satisfacen múltiples necesidades a la vez, explican misterios, nos reconfortan, equilibran nuestros mapas simbólicos del universo, alimentan nuestro anhelo de secretos y nos recuerdan la extrañeza que aún existe en la Tierra. Aunque nunca encontremos pruebas de una antigua civilización subterránea, el hecho de que tantas culturas la hayan imaginado dice algo profundo sobre nosotros. Somos criaturas que necesitamos creer que hay más de lo que se ve a simple vista, que el mundo alberga capas más allá de lo visible. Y quizás, solo quizás, esas historias no sean del todo erróneas, porque aunque el subsuelo no esconda una ciudad olvidada, sí esconde innumerables formas de vida que apenas comenzamos a comprender. En ese sentido, nuestra imaginación de mundos ocultos siempre está justificada. Bajo nuestros pies, realmente hay mundos que aún no hemos visto. Hay algo en las cuevas y la oscuridad que nos atrae, incluso cuando una parte de nosotros quiere retroceder. No es una simple atracción. Se mezcla con miedo, curiosidad y una sensación de extrañeza que pocos entornos crean. La gente puede adentrarse en un bosque y maravillarse, o pararse junto al mar y sentir asombro. Pero entrar en una cueva es diferente. En el momento en que dejas atrás la luz del día, tus sentidos cambian. La vista se limita, el sonido adquiere una nueva fuerza. Cada gota de agua resuena, cada cambio de aire se siente vivo. Es como si la cueva misma observara, escuchara, esperara. Eso es parte de su atractivo. Para nuestros antepasados, las cuevas eran a la vez santuario y desafío. Ofrecían protección contra el clima y los depredadores, pero también presentaban riesgos. Uno podía perderse, lesionarse, quedar atrapado, y aún así la gente seguía regresando. Algunas de las obras de arte más antiguas que conocemos fueron pintadas en las profundidades de las cuevas. Imaginen lo que eso significaba. No era simplemente decoración para los lugares donde vivía la gente. Eran viajes peligrosos que requerían fuego, preparación y cooperación, todo con el fin de dejar imágenes en las paredes lejos de la luz del día. Este esfuerzo sugiere que las cuevas tenían un significado más allá de lo práctico. Eran lugares significativos, lugares donde las reglas ordinarias de la vida sobre la tierra no se aplicaban plenamente. La oscuridad misma siempre ha moldeado nuestra imaginación. Sin luz, el cerebro funciona de manera diferente. La visión, nuestro sentido dominante, pierde fiabilidad. La mente llena los vacíos con posibilidades. En la oscuridad total, puedes imaginar formas que no existen. Aquí, sonidos sin origen, te sientes observado cuando estás solo. Esto no solo ocurre en cuevas antiguas. Incluso hoy, quienes pasan tiempo en la oscuridad profunda reportan sensaciones extrañas, percepción distorsionada del tiempo e incluso alucinaciones leves. Al cerebro no le gusta la ausencia de información. La compensa creando la suya propia. Y así, las cuevas se convierten en escenarios naturales para historias de espíritus, monstruos y civilizaciones ocultas. Pero su atractivo no solo reside en el miedo o la distorsión. Las cuevas también ofrecen algo relajante. Son silenciosas. El caos de la superficie, el viento, la lluvia, los depredadores, las tribus, rivales, se desvanece. Dentro de una cueva hay consistencia. La temperatura se mantiene estable. Las paredes se sienten protectoras. La luz del fuego se puede controlar. Para un grupo que busca el orden en un mundo impredecible, esta estabilidad habría sido invaluable. Las cuevas son paradójicas en ese sentido, aterradoras y reconfortantes, desorientadoras y ancladas. Esa paradoja es lo que las hace tan atractivas. Los psicólogos podrían llamar a esto el efecto borde. Los humanos se sienten atraídos por los límites, lugares donde un mundo se transforma en otro. Una costa donde la tierra se encuentra con el mar siempre se siente especial. Un borde de bosque donde el campo abierto se convierte en un bosque sombrío llama la atención. Las cuevas son otro borde, quizás el más dramático. Son el umbral entre la luz y la oscuridad, la seguridad y el peligro, lo conocido y lo desconocido. De pie en la entrada, sentimos ambos impulsos a la vez, la atracción de profundizar y la urgencia de regresar. También hay algo simbólico en las cuevas. En diferentes culturas se las ha vinculado al renacimiento. Salir de una cueva puede sentirse como salir de un útero. Algunos mitos describen héroes que nacieron en cuevas o experimentaron transformaciones allí. La oscuridad se convierte no solo en ausencia de luz, sino en una etapa necesaria en un viaje. Entras, cambias, sales diferente. Esta capa simbólica puede ser parte de la razón por la que las cuevas han seguido capturando la imaginación mucho después de que dejaron de ser refugios prácticos. La belleza física de las cuevas añade otra capa a su atractivo. Estalactitas y ácaros de estalactitas, formados gota a gota durante miles de años, crean paisajes únicos en la superficie. Los depósitos minerales brillan a la luz de las antorchas. Los ríos subterráneos excavan cámaras que parecen catedrales. Cuando los primeros humanos vieron estas cosas, debieron sentir asombro. El mismo asombro que sentimos hoy al entrar en una vasta caverna. Semejante belleza en un lugar tan oculto refuerza la idea de que las cuevas son más que accidentes geográficos. Se sienten como mundos secretos revelados solo a quienes están dispuestos a adentrarse en la oscuridad. Incluso los animales contribuyen al misterio. Murciélagos, peces ciegos, insectos adaptados a la oscuridad total. Estas criaturas parecen habitantes de otro planeta. Para quienes no tenían explicaciones científicas, su existencia habría sido inquietante. ¿Cómo podría algo vivir sin luz? ¿Cómo podrían los peces no tener ojos? Los mundos subterráneos parecen funcionar con reglas diferentes. Si la vida pudo adaptarse de forma tan extraña aquí, seguramente sociedades enteras también podrían. Y luego está el tiempo. En las cuevas, el tiempo se siente alterado. Sin luz natural no hay marcadores naturales. Una hora puede parecer minutos o extenderse eternamente. El silencio, el goteo constante del agua, la constancia de la piedra, todo se combina para crear la sensación de que el tiempo se ha ralentizado o incluso detenido. Esta atemporalidad se suma a la sensación de extraterrestre. Es fácil imaginar que una cueva es un lugar apartado donde la historia ordinaria no tiene cabida, donde podrían existir civilizaciones al margen del fluir del tiempo superficial. En la actualidad, aún sentimos este atractivo. La gente viaja para explorar cuevas, no solo por ciencia, sino por aventura. La espeleología, la exploración de cuevas, el turismo subterráneo, todos alimentan el mismo impulso. Queremos ver qué hay más allá de la luz, aunque nos asuste. Comunidades enteras de entusiastas se dedican a cartografiar cuevas, documentarlas y, a veces, arriesgar sus vidas para adentrarse más que nadie. Y aunque rara vez encuentran algo inesperado más allá de la roca, el agua y el aire, la posibilidad persiste. Quizás la siguiente cámara contenga algo diferente. Quizás el siguiente túnel revele un mundo secreto. El atractivo de las cuevas y la oscuridad también explica por qué tantos mitos de civilizaciones ocultas las sitúan bajo tierra en lugar de en la superficie. Sabemos cómo es el cielo. Es vasto, abierto y ha sido visible para todos a lo largo de la historia. Encierra misterio, sí, pero no secreto. El subsuelo, en cambio, puede ocultar cosas de verdad. Puedes caminar sobre una cámara sin saber que está ahí. Puedes vivir toda tu vida en la superficie sin darte cuenta de que hay redes debajo de ti. Esta capacidad de secretismo convierte al subsuelo en el lienzo perfecto para la imaginación. Incluso hoy, nuestro lenguaje refleja su atractivo. Hablamos de adentrarnos en las profundidades cuando buscamos conocimiento. Llamamos enterrados a los pensamientos ocultos. Describimos afrontar los miedos como adentrarnos en la oscuridad. Estas frases muestran cuán profundamente están arraigadas las cuevas y la oscuridad en nuestras mentes, no solo como espacios físicos, sino como metáforas de las partes desconocidas de nosotros mismos. Quizás el atractivo también resida en el contraste. Vivimos gran parte de nuestras vidas en la luz. El sol sale y se pone. Las luces artificiales prolongan nuestros días. Las ciudades brillan en la noche. La oscuridad, la verdadera oscuridad, es rara. Las cuevas nos recuerdan lo que se siente estar sin luz. Nos obligan a prestar atención a los sonidos, al tacto y a nuestra propia respiración. Eliminan las distracciones. Para algunos eso es aterrador. Para otros es una experiencia que conecta con la tierra. En cualquier caso, hace que la experiencia sea inolvidable. En cierto modo, las cuevas son espejos. Nos reflejan nuestra imaginación, nuestros miedos, nuestros anhelos. Al entrar, nos traemos nuestras historias, y la cueva les da forma. Una gota se convierte en un latido, una sombra en una figura, un eco en una voz. Y pronto, la cueva deja de ser solo roca. Está llena de significado. Por eso la idea de una civilización subterránea parece plausible en la imaginación, aunque no esté respaldada por pruebas. Las cuevas ya se perciben como lugares donde podrían existir otras realidades. Nos invitan a creer que hay algo más ahí, esperando, oculto. Cuando las historias describen vastos reinos bajo montañas o sociedades sabias en cavernas ocultas, se basan en esa sensación natural de atractivo. La oscuridad en sí misma puede ser la parte más poderosa de esto. La oscuridad elimina los detalles, pero al hacerlo, da libertad a la mente. Cuando no puedes ver lo que hay, puedes imaginar cualquier cosa. La oscuridad no está vacía, está lleno de posibilidades. Y esa posibilidad es infinitamente atractiva. Cuando las personas a lo largo de la historia intentaron explicar los misterios del mundo, a menudo miraban hacia arriba, a las estrellas, pero con la misma frecuencia miraban hacia abajo, a la tierra misma. El suelo bajo sus pies no era solo tierra y piedra, era el umbral a otros reinos. En la imaginación antigua, las cuevas no eran huecos vacíos, eran puertas, pasajes, reinos enteros ocultos debajo. Y de esta sensación surgieron algunos de los mitos más perdurables que la humanidad haya contado jamás. Mitos de reinos subterráneos que albergaban dioses, espíritus y, a veces, civilizaciones enteras. Tomemos como ejemplo a los griegos. Sus historias del inframundo no eran vagos susurros, sino geografías detalladas. El Hades no era simplemente oscuridad, estaba organizado, mapeado en el mito con ríos como Palos y Frondosos, hombres hada como Caronte, jueces que sopesaban el destino de las almas, e incluso regiones divididas para el castigo o la paz. Cuando los griegos entraban en cuevas, muchos creían que estaban literalmente parados en los confines de este mundo. Algunos sitios, como el Necroantion de Epus, se consideraban entradas donde los mortales podían intentar hablar con los muertos. Estos no eran viajes simbólicos en la mente de la gente, eran verdaderos umbrales, puntos físicos donde el reino de los vivos se rozaba con el reino subterráneo de los espíritus. Los romanos heredaron y expandieron estas ideas. Ellos también creían en portales en cuevas sagradas que conducían al reino de los muertos. El munderas, un pozo en el foro romano, se abría solo ciertos días del año. Se creía que permitía a los espíritus pasar de un mundo a otro. Era un recordatorio ritual de que bajo la ciudad, bajo todo el ruido y el orden del imperio, existía otro dominio que existía silenciosamente, poderoso e invisible. Cruza el mundo hasta el Mer y encontrarás Sebala, el temible inframundo gobernado por dioses de la muerte y espíritus que se deleitaban con el engaño. Sus mitos hablan de héroes que descendían a este lugar oculto, enfrentándose a pruebas de oscuridad, frío, jaguares y fuego. Las cuevas en tierras mayas eran vistas como bocas literales de Xibalba, aberturas a un reino tan estructurado y vívido como las aldeas de la superficie. La evidencia arqueológica respalda esta creencia. Muchas cuevas en Centroamérica contienen ofrendas, grabados y signos de actividad ritual. La gente no usaba las cuevas simplemente como almacenamiento. Interactuaban con lo que creían que eran las puertas mismas a otro mundo. En las tradiciones nórdicas, el subsuelo era igual de significativo. El gran árbol del mundo, Yggdrasil, se imaginaba con raíces que se extendían profundamente hacia los reinos de la escarcha, las serpientes y los ancestros. Niflheim, el mundo de la niebla y el frío, se encontraba debajo, un lugar de fuerzas ancestrales. La idea de viajar hacia abajo no era metafórica, era el equilibrio del cosmos. Los dioses vivían arriba, los humanos en el medio y otros poderes debajo, todos conectados a través del árbol. La tierra no era un escenario plano, tenía capas, y cada capa tenía su propia sociedad. En las tradiciones hindúes y budistas encontramos mitos de Agartha o Shambhala, reinos ocultos bajo las montañas, a veces dentro de la propia tierra. Estos no eran fosos oscuros de castigo, sino lugares de sabiduría, paz y conocimiento avanzado. La clandestinidad aquí no era infernal, sino utópica. Los buscadores creían que algún día estas civilizaciones ocultas podrían revelarse al mundo de la superficie, trayendo equilibrio e iluminación. Y en algunas leyendas, solo los puros de corazón podían encontrar el camino hacia ellos, lo que sugiere que estos lugares no solo estaban ocultos física, sino también moralmente, y eran accesibles solo para aquellos que los merecían. Las tradiciones nativas americanas también tienen ecos de orígenes subterráneos. Muchas tribus cuentan historias de ancestros que surgieron de debajo de la tierra para vivir en la superficie. Los Hopi, por ejemplo, describen mundos anteriores a continuación, cada uno destruido o transformado, con personas trepando a través de aberturas hasta llegar al mundo actual. Desde este punto de vista, el subsuelo no es solo el lugar al que van las almas después de la muerte, es de donde vino la humanidad misma, un útero de piedra y oscuridad que dio a luz a la vida arriba. En China, los textos taoístas y budistas hablan a veces de reinos ocultos dentro de las montañas, paraísos protegidos del caos del mundo de la superficie. Estos reinos también fueron imaginados como subterráneos o dentro de la tierra, protegidos del tiempo y la corrupción. El subsuelo se convierte no solo en un lugar de muerte o peligro, sino también de preservación, un almacén de sabiduría que espera el momento adecuado. Lo sorprendente es que estos mitos, aunque separados por geografía y cultura, comparten ciertos temas. Imaginan el subsuelo como poblado, no estéril, no vacío, sino lleno de seres, sociedades, fuerzas y reglas. Imaginan entradas con las que los humanos pueden tropezar, a menudo en cuevas, sumideros o fosos sagrados, y tratan estas entradas como significativas, dignas de ritual, miedo o anhelo. Algunos mitos enfatizan el castigo y el miedo. Otros enfatizan la sabiduría y la seguridad, pero en ambos casos, el underground tiene significado. Es el otro lado de la existencia, un lugar que refleja el mundo de la superficie, pero que opera según leyes diferentes. ¿Por qué tantas culturas convergerían en esta idea? Parte de ello puede proceder del entierro. Cuando los muertos son colocados en la tierra, es natural imaginar que continúan de alguna manera debajo. Parte de esto puede provenir del uso práctico de las cuevas como refugio y rituales que crearon asociaciones entre lo subterráneo y lo sagrado, y parte de ello puede provenir del puro misterio de la oscuridad. Una vez que se cuenta una historia sobre lo que hay debajo, se vuelve creíble porque nadie puede refutarla fácilmente. No se puede ver lo suficiente dentro de una cueva para decir con certeza que no hay nada allí. La persistencia de estos mitos sugiere que los reinos subterráneos cubrían una profunda necesidad en la narración humana. Explicaron la muerte, ofrecieron esperanza o dieron advertencias. Le dieron estructura al caos. Ayudaron a las personas a ubicarse en un universo que parecía estratificado, complejo y lleno de poderes invisibles. Incluso hoy quedan ecos de estos mitos. La gente todavía cuenta historias de la tierra hueca, de civilizaciones perdidas esperando bajo la superficie. Las teorías de conspiración y las creencias marginales sobre túneles, ciudades secretas y poderes ocultos son versiones modernas de mitos antiguos. Se basan en la misma fuente, la sensación de que la tierra misma no está en silencio, sino llena de secretos. Lo que también es fascinante es cómo estos mitos a menudo retratan a las civilizaciones subterráneas como más avanzadas o más primitivas que la vida superficial. A veces son utopías con conocimiento y paz fuera de nuestro alcance. A veces son lugares de horror donde los espíritus atormentan y las tinieblas devoran. Rara vez se los imagina como personas simplemente ordinarias. La clandestinidad siempre es extrema, ya sea en sabiduría o en peligro. Esta extremidad refleja la intensidad emocional de las propias cuevas. No se sienten neutrales. Se sienten cargados, como si entrar dentro te comprometiera con una historia más grande que tú mismo. Cuando juntamos todos estos mitos, surge un patrón. El subsuelo nunca es solo geología, es un espejo de nuestros miedos, nuestras esperanzas y nuestras preguntas. Es un lugar para poner lo que no podemos explicar. Las civilizaciones que viven debajo de nosotros, ya sea como dioses, espíritus o ancestros, son formas de reconocer que el mundo es más grande de lo que podemos ver, que hay capas de existencia más allá de nuestra experiencia ordinaria. Y al imaginar estos reinos, los pueblos antiguos no eran tan diferentes de nosotros. Estaban haciendo la misma pregunta que hacemos nosotros esta noche. ¿Qué pasa si la vida organizada y significativa, existe bajo tierra? Cuando la gente habla de civilizaciones ocultas bajo tierra, algunos nombres salen a la superficie una y otra vez. Shambhala, Agartha y la tierra hueca. Estos son más que mitos pasajeros. Se han convertido en anclas de tradiciones enteras de narración, creencias y especulaciones. Cada uno de ellos ha sido moldeado y remodelado a lo largo de los siglos, entretejiendo hilos de religión, folclore e incluso pseudociencia. Y juntos nos muestran hasta qué punto la imaginación humana está dispuesta a cavar bajo tierra en busca de algo más grande que nosotros mismos. Shambhala es quizás el más famoso de los tres. En la tradición budista se describe como un reino oculto de paz y sabiduría en algún lugar más allá de los mapas ordinarios. No es un lugar de castigo o tormento, sino un lugar de iluminación. En algunas versiones se dice que está escondido en el Himalaya, protegido de los ojos de los indignos. En otros, existe en un espacio que es tanto físico como espiritual, accesible solo cuando el mundo está listo. Las primeras menciones aparecen en el Kalachakra Tantra, un texto importante del budismo tibetano. Allí Shala no es simplemente una leyenda. Se trata como un ámbito que desempeña un papel en el desarrollo de la historia. Una profecía incluso dice que en una época futura, cuando el mundo esté dominado por la codicia y el caos, el pueblo de Shambhala surgirá para restablecer el equilibrio. Lo que hace que Shambhala sea convincente es cómo combina la idea de un mundo oculto con un significado moral. No solo está oculto geográficamente, sino éticamente. Solo aquellos preparados espiritualmente pueden alcanzarlo. Esto hace que sea menos una ciudad perdida con la que tropezar y más un estado de preparación. Pero para los oyentes de toda la historia, también ha sido fácil imaginarlo físicamente. A veces se ha preguntado a los exploradores del Himalaya si estaban buscando a Shambhala. Las historias de capas que apuntan a picos distantes y que sugieren que valles secretos albergaban el reino han persistido durante siglos. Incluso los escritores occidentales durante la ola de fascinación por la filosofía oriental en los siglos XIX y XX aprovecharon la idea. Las novelas, las películas y los movimientos espirituales comenzaron a hacer referencia a Shambhala como si fuera a la vez un lugar real y una metáfora del potencial humano. Agartha es una leyenda relacionada pero distinta. A menudo confundida o mezclada con Shambhala, se dice que Agartha es un reino subterráneo conectado por túneles que atraviesan todo el mundo. En algunas historias, su capital es Shambhala, por lo que los dos nombres forman parte del mismo mito. En otros, Agartha está separada, una red oculta donde seres avanzados viven en paz, guiando o influyendo ocasionalmente en la humanidad de la superficie. El interés por Agartha surgió a finales del siglo XIX, cuando los escritores ocultistas de Europa comenzaron a describirlo como un vasto reino subterráneo habitado por maestros iluminados. Sugirieron que estos seres preservaron la sabiduría antigua de civilizaciones perdidas, tal vez incluso de la Atlántida o la Mura, y que ocasionalmente permitieron a los habitantes de la superficie vislumbrar su conocimiento. En estas historias, Agartha se convierte en una utopía bajo nuestros pies, no solo un valle escondido, sino un mundo entero cuidadosamente protegido de la violencia y el desorden de la superficie. Los escritores lo describieron con elaborado detalle, brillando con su propia luz interior, impulsado por energías desconocidas, poblado por seres que habían trascendido las limitaciones humanas ordinarias. Para las personas que vivían los trastornos de la industrialización y la guerra, la idea de un lugar así era profundamente atractiva. Ofrecía la esperanza de que, en algún lugar libre de la codicia y el conflicto, la sabiduría perdurara. Luego está la teoría de la tierra hueca que toma estos mitos y los expande hasta convertirlos en algo aún más grandioso. En lugar de imaginar reinos ocultos en cavernas o túneles aislados, la teoría de la tierra hueca sugiere que todo el planeta es hueco por dentro con vastos espacios, tal vez incluso océanos y continentes debajo de la corteza. En algunas versiones, un pequeño sol interior ilumina este mundo interior, creando las condiciones donde la vida podría prosperar. En otros, el interior está conectado a la superficie mediante grandes aberturas en los polos. La idea de una tierra hueca no es nueva. Apareció en la ciencia occidental ya en el siglo XVII, cuando el astrónomo Edmund Halley, más conocido por el cometa que lleva su nombre, sugirió que la Tierra podría estar compuesta de múltiples capas concéntricas. Hola estaba tratando de explicar lecturas inusuales de la brújula, y aunque su propuesta fue una especulación científica más que un mito, abrió la puerta a imaginaciones posteriores. En el siglo XIX, escritores y exploradores aprovecharon el concepto. Novelas como El viaje al centro de la Tierra de Julio Verne hicieron que la tierra hueca fuera vivida en la cultura popular, y en los siglos transcurridos desde entonces, los teóricos marginales han mantenido viva la idea, insistiendo en que los gobiernos o los científicos están ocultando evidencia de aberturas en los polos, o que fenómenos extraños como luces inexplicables en el cielo prueban la presencia de mundos internos. Para aquellos que creen que Shambhala y Agartha no son solo metáforas, sino sociedades reales dentro de esta tierra hueca. En estos relatos, las leyendas y la teoría se fusionan. La tierra hueca es la geografía, y Agartha o Shambhala son las civilizaciones dentro de ella. A veces se describe a los habitantes como humanos avanzados, otras veces como seres completamente diferentes, gigantes, maestros espirituales o supervivientes de antiguos cataclismos que se retiraron hacia abajo. Los escépticos señalan, por supuesto, que la geología descarta una tierra hueca. Los datos sísmicos muestran que nuestro planeta tiene capas, corteza, manto, núcleo externo y núcleo interno. No hay lugar para grandes espacios vacíos, pero la falta de plausibilidad científica nunca ha borrado el atractivo. Los mitos no están limitados por la física, están atados por lo que resuena con las esperanzas y los temores humanos. Y lo que resuena aquí es el sueño de la perfección oculta. El mundo de la superficie es caótico, violento e impredecible, pero tal vez, solo tal vez, haya un lugar debajo de todo esto donde prevalezcan el orden y la sabiduría. Quizás la verdadera historia de la humanidad esté guardada silenciosamente bajo tierra, esperando el momento adecuado para resurgir. Esta es la promesa de Shambhala, Agartha y los huecos, que no estamos solos, que el mundo está plagado de secretos, que la vida es más grande de lo que podemos ver. Vale la pena observar cómo estas leyendas se adaptan a las necesidades de su época. En el antiguo Tíbet, Shambhala sirvió como ancla espiritual, un recordatorio de que la iluminación era posible incluso en una época de agitación. En la Europa del siglo XIX, Agartha reflejaba fascinación por las civilizaciones perdidas y la sabiduría esotérica. En la cultura conspirativa moderna, la tierra hueca proporciona un lienzo interminable para sospechas sobre el secreto gubernamental o la influencia extraterrestre. Cada versión cambia los detalles, pero la idea central sigue siendo la misma. Hay más debajo de nosotros que piedra. Parte de su resistencia proviene de la propia geografía. Montañas como el Himalaya están llenas de valles y cuevas escondidos, muchos de ellos inexplorados. La corteza terrestre realmente contiene redes de túneles, tubos de lava y cavernas que se extienden por millas. Aunque sabemos que se forman mediante procesos naturales, todavía parecen evidencia de que la Tierra tiene espacio para más. Cuando alguien oye hablar de una cueva que se extiende más allá de lo que se ha cartografiado, no es difícil imaginar que podría conectarse con algo más grande, algo secreto. Las historias de exploradores que tropezaron con entradas a estos mundos solo refuerzan el mito. Circulan historias de aventureros perdidos, mapas misteriosos y expediciones que desaparecieron. Ya sean verdaderos o inventados, dan peso al sentimiento de que estos lugares podrían existir. Después de todo, ¿cuánto del interior de la Tierra hemos visto realmente? Hemos cavado minas y perforado profundamente, pero apenas hemos arañado la superficie en comparación con la profundidad total del planeta. Lo desconocido deja espacio para la creencia, y así Shambhala, Agartha y la tierra hueca siguen viviendo, no como realidades comprobadas, sino como historias vivas. Nos brindan formas de imaginar la perfección, el secreto, la sabiduría y el misterio, todo al mismo tiempo. Nos hacen creer que la humanidad aún no lo ha descubierto todo, que fuera de nuestro alcance hay sociedades mejores que la nuestra, preservadas en piedra y sombra. Ya sea que los veamos como mitos, metáforas o posibilidades, continúan moldeando nuestra forma de pensar sobre lo que hay debajo. Nos recuerdan que nuestra fascinación por las civilizaciones subterráneas no es solo una curiosidad moderna, sino un largo hilo conductor que atraviesa las culturas de todo el mundo. Y cuando esta noche preguntamos qué significaría si la primera civilización viviera bajo tierra, estamos aprovechando la misma corriente de imaginación. No estamos inventando algo nuevo. Nos unimos a una conversación que se ha prolongado durante siglos, a través de monjes, narradores, exploradores y soñadores. Y en ese sentido, las leyendas de Shambhala, Agartha y la tierra hueca no tratan solo de lo que podría esconderse debajo, sino de la continuidad de la imaginación humana misma. Para imaginar una civilización viviendo bajo tierra, tenemos que plantearnos una de las preguntas más básicas de todas. ¿Podría la vida humana, funcionar sin luz solar? El Sol es una parte tan importante de nuestra existencia que parece inseparable de la supervivencia. Nos despertamos con él, medimos nuestros días con él y dependemos de él para producir alimentos. Sin embargo, si miramos de cerca, descubrimos que la vida sin luz solar no solo es posible, sino que ya está sucediendo en lugares en los que rara vez notamos. El mundo debajo de nosotros está lleno de ejemplos que muestran cómo la vida se adapta incluso en la oscuridad total. El primer desafío, por supuesto, es la comida. Las plantas de la superficie dependen de la fotosíntesis, convirtiendo la luz solar en energía. Quita el sol y la familiar cadena de la vida colapsa. Pero no toda la vida sigue este patrón. En las cuevas, los hongos y las bacterias prosperan sin fotosíntesis, alimentándose de materia orgánica en descomposición transportada por el agua o los animales. Algunas bacterias incluso sobreviven únicamente con energía química, extrayendo nutrientes de los minerales de las rocas. Se han encontrado ecosistemas enteros a kilómetros de profundidad, sustentados no por la luz solar, sino por la quimiosíntesis, el proceso de utilizar reacciones químicas para crear energía. En las profundidades del océano alrededor de las fuentes hidrotermales, la vida florece en completa oscuridad. Gusanos tubulares gigantes, cangrejos y peces extraños viven de la energía liberada por las sustancias químicas del agua. Estos ecosistemas nos muestran que la vida no necesita el sol en absoluto, solo necesita una fuente de energía y formas de utilizarla. Si la naturaleza puede construir comunidades enteras de criaturas en esas condiciones, no es tan difícil imaginar que los humanos también encuentren formas de adaptarse. Los seres humanos, por supuesto, no pueden vivir únicamente de minerales o bacterias, pero si los primeros habitantes bajo tierra aprendieran a cultivar hongos, criar insectos o domesticar animales adaptados a las cavernas, podrían construir un sistema alimentario independiente de la luz solar. Los hongos ya crecen en la oscuridad y prosperan en el abono, la madera o la tierra. Insectos como los grillos y los escarabajos pueden alimentarse de restos orgánicos y proporcionar proteínas. Se podían pescar e incluso criar peces en ríos o lagos subterráneos. No se parecería a una agricultura de superficie con campos de cereales y rebaños de ganado. Sería más pequeño, más extraño, más frágil, pero funcionaría. El agua sería otra cuestión. Sin embargo, el subsuelo no está seco. En las cuevas son comunes acuíferos, ríos subterráneos y charcas de goteo. Las primeras civilizaciones podrían haber recolectado y almacenado esta agua utilizando sistemas naturales para filtrarla. De hecho, muchas sociedades antiguas de la superficie ya dependían de canales subterráneos, como los Carnets en Persia, para llevar agua a sus campos. El conocimiento del agua subterránea es tan antiguo como la propia civilización. La luz es más complicada. El fuego proporciona calor e iluminación, pero el humo en espacios cerrados es peligroso. Sin embargo, sabemos que los pueblos antiguos eran ingeniosos. Las cuevas de Francia todavía conservan marcas de hollín de las antorchas que llevaban los primeros artistas, lo que demuestra que tenían métodos para iluminar cámaras profundas sin asfixiarse. Si una sociedad clandestina se hubiera desarrollado más, podrían haber descubierto formas de ventilar el humo a través de grietas naturales, o diseñar cámaras donde el flujo de aire lo arrastrara. Con el tiempo, podrían haber dependido menos del fuego y más de materiales incandescentes. Algunos minerales fluyen en las condiciones adecuadas. Algunos hongos emiten una luz tenue. Incluso ahora existen insectos y peces bioluminiscentes. No es imposible que los humanos que viven bajo tierra hayan domesticado o cultivado tales fuentes de luz natural. Luego viene la cuestión de la salud. Sin luz solar, los humanos pierden el acceso a la vitamina D, esencial para los huesos y el bienestar general. Pero esto también tiene soluciones. La vitamina D se puede obtener de ciertos alimentos como pescado, huevos y champiñones. Quizás las sociedades subterráneas se apoyaron en gran medida en estos y, a lo largo de generaciones, sus cuerpos podrían haberse adaptado a la falta de luz solar, cambiando el tono de la piel, el metabolismo e incluso la fisiología para adaptarse a su entorno. La ciencia ya ha documentado cómo los animales en las cuevas pierden pigmentación, encogen los ojos y se adaptan a la energía química. Los humanos cambiarían más lentamente, pero con el tiempo suficiente, ellos también podrían desarrollar rasgos adecuados para la vida en la oscuridad. ¿Qué pasa con la mente? La luz da forma a nuestro sentido del tiempo. Sin él, nuestros ritmos circadianos cambian. Los experimentos actuales con personas que viven en cuevas muestran que los ciclos del sueño pueden alargarse o reducirse sin la luz solar para anclarlos. Pero en una sociedad que vive completamente bajo tierra, estos ritmos podrían adaptarse de manera diferente. En lugar de seguir un ciclo de 24 horas, las personas podrían organizar sus vidas en torno al trabajo, las comidas y el descanso, sin estar protegidas de la influencia del sol. Los relojes o las rutinas podrían reemplazar las señales naturales. En cierto modo, incluso podría resultarles liberador, una oportunidad de darle forma al tiempo como quisieran. Por supuesto, los desafíos no terminarían ahí. La agricultura en la superficie produce excedentes de alimentos, lo que permite a grandes poblaciones. Los sistemas subterráneos serían más difíciles de escalar, pero las civilizaciones no tienen que parecerse a la nuestra para existir. Una comunidad más pequeña y más unida podría prosperar bajo tierra, sostenida por un cuidadoso equilibrio y un profundo conocimiento de su entorno. Los efectos psicológicos de la oscuridad pueden ser profundos. Los humanos nos sentimos atraídos por la luz, por el espacio abierto. Vivir bajo tierra puede resultar claustrofóbico y aislado, pero para aquellos nacidos en ella, la oscuridad sería normal. Los niños que nunca habían visto el sol tal vez no se lo pierdan. En cambio, verían seguridad en los muros de piedra, comodidad en el entorno predecible y comunidad en los espacios cerrados. Sus mitos podrían advertir sobre la superficie como peligrosa, caótica e incluso maldita. El metro, en su opinión, sería el verdadero hogar. Lo interesante es que la tecnología moderna hace que esa idea parezca menos descabellada. La gente ha construido búnkeres subterráneos, sistemas de metro e incluso ciudades diseñadas para resistir desastres. En lugares como Montreal o Helsinki ya existen redes subterráneas de tiendas y viviendas que protegen a la gente de las condiciones climáticas extremas. Si podemos hacer esto ahora con recursos limitados, no es imposible que las sociedades antiguas encontraran formas más simples pero efectivas de vivir debajo. Y cuando consideramos que la Tierra misma ofrece tanto espacio bajo tierra, la idea parece casi natural. Las cuevas se extienden por millas. Los tubos de lava pueden ser lo suficientemente anchos como para albergar edificios enteros. Algunos sumideros se abren hacia cámaras del tamaño de estadios. Multiplique eso en todo el mundo y tendrá innumerables lugares donde la vida podría esconderse. Entonces, ¿podría funcionar la vida sin luz solar? La evidencia sugiere que sí. No fácilmente, no sin adaptación y creatividad, pero sí. Hongos, insectos, peces y bacterias demuestran que los ecosistemas prosperan en la oscuridad. Los antiguos demostraron que las cuevas podían usarse con fines artísticos, rituales y de supervivencia. Los ejemplos modernos demuestran que la vida subterránea es posible con planificación. Si los juntamos, surge la imagen de un mundo donde la civilización humana podría efectivamente arraigarse bajo tierra, lejos del sol, lejos de la superficie, sosteniéndose silenciosamente durante generaciones. Y si eso sucediera, es posible que nunca lo sepamos porque una civilización subterránea, si lograra perdurar, dejaría pocos rastros en la superficie. Podría permanecer oculto, su historia sellada en piedra, sus historias contadas solo por quienes lo vivieron. Si queremos imaginar personas viviendo bajo tierra, el primer paso es observar lo que la naturaleza ya está haciendo allí abajo. Porque mucho antes de que los humanos pensaran en construir túneles o tallar cámaras, el subsuelo estaba lleno de vida. De hecho, podría ser justo decir que la mayor parte del espacio habitable de la Tierra está oculto bajo nuestros pies. El suelo, la roca, las bolsas de agua, la corteza profunda. Estos son hábitats en los que no pensamos a menudo, pero están repletos de criaturas que ya han demostrado sobrevivir. En la oscuridad no solo es posible, sino exitoso. Comience con algo tan común como la tierra. Toma un puñado y tendrás un ecosistema completo. Bacterias, hongos, neotodos, ácaros, pequeños insectos, todos viven, comen, se reproducen y mueren en un mundo invisible a los ojos. Miles de millones de organismos pueden vivir en un solo puñado de tierra. Descomponen la materia orgánica, reciclan nutrientes y mantienen el sistema en funcionamiento. Esto ya es un recordatorio de que la luz del sol, si bien es importante arriba, no es el único combustible abajo. La energía almacenada en plantas, animales muertos y minerales se filtra hacia abajo, alimentando capa tras capa de vida. Si profundizas en las cuevas, encontrarás comunidades aún más extrañas. Algunas están completamente aisladas de la superficie. Aislados durante millones de años, han evolucionado en direcciones que nunca esperaríamos. Peces ciegos que navegan con sensores en la piel, insectos sin alas que dependen del tacto y la vibración, cangrejos albinos que se alimentan de bacterias en lugar de plantas, cadenas alimentarias enteras que nunca ven el sol. Un ejemplo famoso es la cueva de Mubel en Rumania. Sellado durante unos 5 millones de años, contiene un ecosistema como ningún otro lugar. El aire está lleno de sulfuro de hidrógeno, tóxico para la mayoría de las criaturas de la superficie, pero allí las bacterias utilizan sustancias químicas, no luz, para crear energía. Esas bacterias se convierten en la base de la cadena alimentaria, alimentando a gusanos, arañas y otras criaturas que se han adaptado a este entorno extraño. Es un ecosistema funcional, completo y autosostenible, sin un solo rayo de sol. Y Mubal no es el único. En lo profundo del océano, alrededor de respiraderos hidrotermales, la vida prospera donde la luz nunca llega. También en este caso, las bacterias utilizan energía química para crear alimentos. Gusanos tubulares gigantes, almejas, cangrejos y peces se agrupan alrededor de los respiraderos, formando comunidades tan ricas que los científicos quedaron atónitos cuando fueron descubiertos por primera vez. Demostraron que la luz del sol no es la regla universal de la vida. Donde hay energía, la vida encontrará la manera de utilizarla. Aún más profundamente, en las grietas de la corteza terrestre se ha encontrado vida. Las bacterias y los archaea, organismos de una sola especie, viven a kilómetros de profundidad bajo la superficie, se alimentan de minerales y sobreviven a presiones y calor extremos. Algunos de estos microbios crecen tan lentamente que sus ciclos de vida se extienden por miles de años. No son las bulliciosas sociedades de la superficie, pero son una prueba de que existe vida donde antes pensábamos que era imposible. Y no se trata solo de criaturas pequeñas. Los animales más grandes también se han adaptado a la vida subterránea. Los murciélagos pasan el día en cuevas y salen solo para alimentarse por la noche. Los topos y las ratas topo, desnudas, viven casi exclusivamente bajo la superficie, construyen elaborados sistemas de túneles y crían a sus crías en la oscuridad. Las salamandras viven en estanques subterráneos. Algunas especies son tan especializadas que nunca desarrollan ojos. Estos ejemplos nos recuerdan que vivir bajo tierra no tiene por qué ser temporal. Puede ser un estilo de vida completo, transmitido de generación en generación. En cierto sentido, las plantas también dependen de estrategias subterráneas. Sus raíces llegan profundamente al suelo formando vastas redes. Los hongos conectan esas raíces en lo que los científicos llaman la red maderera, intercambiando nutrientes e información. Aunque las hojas verdes de arriba dependen de la luz solar, gran parte del trabajo real de la planta ocurre debajo, oculta a la vista. Esta vida subterránea trabajada sustenta bosques enteros, lo que demuestra una vez más que el subsuelo no es estéril sino fundamental. Lo que todo esto nos muestra es que la naturaleza ya prospera en condiciones similares a las que imaginamos para las civilizaciones subterráneas. Luz limitada, fuentes de energía extrañas, ecosistemas aislados, son desafíos que la vida ya ha resuelto muchas veces. Si los peces ciegos pueden navegar por las cuevas y las bacterias pueden sobrevivir kilómetros bajo la corteza, no parece descabellado que los humanos con creatividad y cultura también puedan adaptarse. Consideremos también cuán resistente es la vida subterránea. Los ecosistemas superficiales pueden ser destruidos por tormentas, incendios o sequías. Los sistemas subterráneos son más estables, cambian lentamente, protegidos del clima e incluso de algunos desastres naturales. Esta estabilidad puede ser parte de por qué los mitos de civilizaciones ocultas parecen plausibles. Si hay un lugar donde la vida podría perdurar silenciosamente durante siglos, sin que nos demos cuenta, es bajo tierra. Otro aspecto fascinante es cómo la vida subterránea cambia nuestra percepción de la escala. A primera vista, pensamos que los bosques y los océanos son los grandes actores. Bajo tierra, los grandes actores son los microbios. Superan en número y peso a todas las demás formas de vida. Según algunas estimaciones, la masa total de microbios bajo la superficie es mayor que la de todas las plantas y animales combinados. En otras palabras, el subsuelo no es un entorno marginal, es el escenario principal para la vida en la Tierra, y apenas estamos empezando a entenderlo. Los científicos perforan profundos pozos de microbios descubiertos en capas de roca a kilómetros de profundidad. Algunos están vivos pero apenas activos, a un ritmo que difícilmente podemos imaginar. Otros forman comunidades que se alimentan de trazas de sustancias químicas. A esto lo llamamos biosfera profunda y es una de las regiones menos exploradas del planeta. Lo poco que encontramos sugerido es inmenso, diverso y persistente. Esto hace que la idea de civilizaciones subterráneas parezca menos una fantasía y más una cuestión de escala. Si los microbios y los animales pequeños ya viven en mundos ocultos debajo, ¿por qué no seres más grandes? ¿Por qué no los humanos? Con las adaptaciones adecuadas, la naturaleza ya ha construido el modelo. Solo seríamos una variación más. Y si lo piensas bien, los humanos hemos estado imitando este patrón durante mucho tiempo. Hemos construido vendedores de raíces para conservar alimentos, excavamos viviendas subterráneas en acantilados, construimos túneles para viajar y extraemos recursos en profundidad. Cada paso ha sido una forma de tomar prestadas estrategias que la naturaleza ya utiliza. Incluso nuestros modernos espacios subterráneos, búnkeres e instalaciones de almacenamiento reflejan la resiliencia y el aislamiento de los sistemas subterráneos naturales. Cuanto más aprendemos sobre cómo la naturaleza prospera debajo de nosotros, más la imaginación de una civilización subterránea se siente más como una extensión que como una invención. La vida no necesita la luz del sol, necesita energía, estabilidad y adaptación. Están disponibles en abundancia debajo de la superficie. Quizás esta sea la razón por la que persisten los mitos de los reinos subterráneos, porque en cierto sentido ya son ciertos. Hay reinos debajo de nosotros, llenos de vida, llenos de adaptación, llenos de misterio. Puede que no sean reinos humanos con calles y palacios, pero son reinos de su propia especie, invisibles, pero vastos. Y una vez que se acepta eso, el salto para imaginar sociedades humanas entre ellos se vuelve más pequeño. El precedente ya está ahí. El metro está vivo. Siempre ha estado vivo. Y tal vez, solo tal vez, haya sido el hogar de algo más que microbios y peces. Quizás también haya sido nuestro hogar en formas que hemos olvidado. Para imaginar una civilización bajo la superficie, es útil comprender la ciencia de los ecosistemas que ya existen bajo tierra. Estos ecosistemas son diferentes de los bosques, océanos y llanuras a los que estamos acostumbrados. Son más silenciosos, más lentos, más extraños. Y, sin embargo, siguen reglas intrincadas y consistentes que los científicos apenas están comenzando a mapear. Cuando miramos de cerca, vemos que los ecosistemas subterráneos tienen todo lo que una sociedad pueda necesitar: energía, agua, estabilidad y una red de vida que funciona sin luz solar. Lo primero que hay que entender es que la mayoría de los ecosistemas subterráneos no están impulsados por la luz, sino por la química. En la superficie domina la fotosíntesis. Las plantas capturan energía del sol y la pasan a través de las cadenas alimentarias. Bajo tierra no hay sol, por lo que la vida depende de la quimiosíntesis. Los microbios se alimentan de energía química, sulfuro de hidrógeno, metano, hierro u otros minerales y forman la base de las redes alimentarias. En algunas cuevas, las bacterias crecen en gruesas esteras y alimentan a los insectos, que a su vez alimentan a las arañas, los escarabajos o los peces. Estos sistemas parecen frágiles, pero perduran durante millones de años, impulsados por reacciones químicas constantes que nunca se detienen. La hidrología también juega un papel central. El agua se mueve bajo tierra de maneras que dan forma a los ecosistemas. Los acuíferos transportan no solo agua, sino también nutrientes, minerales y microbios. Los ríos subterráneos crean pasadizos, crean lagos y conectan cámaras que de otro modo estarían aisladas. Algunos sistemas dependen del goteo de agua desde arriba, lo que trae pequeñas cantidades de material orgánico desde la superficie. Otros están completamente sellados y sobreviven gracias a los recursos generados en su interior. Para un científico, el agua es el torrente sanguíneo de los ecosistemas subterráneos que transporta vida donde la luz no puede. El oxígeno es otro factor crítico. Las cuevas y las zonas profundas del subsuelo a menudo tienen poco oxígeno y la vida debe adaptarse. Muchos animales subterráneos desarrollan metabolismos lentos que requieren poca energía. Los microbios pasan a procesos anaeróbicos y sobreviven sin oxígeno. En algunos lugares, el metano se convierte en la principal fuente de energía y comunidades microbianas enteras no viven de nada más. Estas adaptaciones muestran cuán flexible puede ser la vida, modificando sus reglas para adaptarse a entornos que matarían a la mayoría de las especies de la superficie. Los propios organismos se dividen en categorías. Hay trogloines, criaturas que visitan cuevas, pero no pueden sobrevivir allí permanentemente, como los murciélagos que duermen durante el día, pero cazan afuera durante la noche. Hay trogiles, criaturas que pueden vivir tanto sobre como bajo tierra, moviéndose entre mundos según lo permitan las condiciones. Y luego están los trogloitas, especialistas que pasan toda su vida bajo tierra. Estos son los peces ciegos más llamativos, las salamandras albinas, insectos con largas antenas para abrirse camino en la oscuridad. La evolución les da forma con el tiempo, eliminando rasgos innecesarios y afinando otros en cuevas aisladas durante millones de años. Los trogloitos se vuelven tan únicos que los científicos los llaman fósiles vivientes, ventanas a cómo el aislamiento esculpe la vida. La estabilidad de los ecosistemas subterráneos es otra característica destacable. En la superficie, los ecosistemas fluctúan según las estaciones, las tormentas, las sequías y los incendios. Bajo tierra, las temperaturas son casi constantes, la humedad es constante y los cambios se producen lentamente. Esta estabilidad permite que la vida persista en un delicado equilibrio. Las poblaciones pueden ser pequeñas, pero perduran por períodos de tiempo asombrosos. En las profundidades de la biosfera, los microbios se reproducen tan lentamente que comunidades enteras parecen congeladas en el tiempo, avanzando en escalas que difícilmente podemos comprender. This stability also makes subterranean ecosystems vulnerable, because they are finely balanced. Any disruption, a change in water chemistry, the introduction of a foreign species, pollution from the surface can cause collapse. In this sense, they're both resilient and fragile, enduring for eons, yet sensitive to sudden shifts. Scientists studying these systems often describe them as analogues for alien worlds. Because they do not depend on sunlight, they resemble what we might expect on planets without bright stars or on moons beneath icy crusts. Europa, Enceladus, and Titan in our own solar system are prime candidates. If life exists there, it might resemble the microbes and specialized creatures we find in Earth's caves. In this way, the science of subterranean ecosystems reaches beyond our planet, giving clues about what life might look like elsewhere. What makes this science so relevant to our question is that it demonstrates every essential component of survival. Underground is already accounted for. Energy sources exist without the sun. Food webs can form from microbes upward. Water cycles carry resources through hidden veins. Oxygen is not always necessary, and life adapts in surprising ways when it is scarce. Stability allows for continuity across unimaginable spans of time. If microbes and fish can do it, humans with technology and cooperation could potentially build upon the same foundations. But the science also reveals limitations. Productivity underground is usually low. Food webs are thinner, populations smaller. Without sunlight, energy is harder to come by, so systems tend to be sparse. This suggests that if humans lived underground, their societies would likely be smaller, tightly regulated, and deeply dependent on resource management. Abundance would be rare. Balance would be everything. The study of subterranean ecosystems has another lesson too. Cooperation is essential. Microbes form symbiotic relationships, sharing resources and functions. Animals adapt to niches, avoiding wasteful competition. Ecosystems underground work because every part is finely tuned to every other. A human society underground would need to mirror this, organizing itself around strict cooperation rather than unchecked growth. And perhaps the most profound lesson is that life underground is invisible but immense. We walk across the surface every day without realizing that beneath us are layers upon layers of thriving systems. The science tells us that the Earth is not solid stone, but a living body. Its veins carrying water, its tissues alive with microbes, its hollows home to creatures we never see. In thinking about subterranean ecosystems, we are reminded that the underground is not barren, it is not empty, it is a vast network of life, slow and strange, but real. And if we take it seriously, then the question of underground civilization shifts. It is no longer a question of whether life could exist. It is a question of how it might organize itself, drawing on the same rules that nature has been using for billions of years. And that leads us naturally to wonder about people, about what our own species would need to build and endure in such a world, and whether the lessons of microbes and fish and blind salamanders could become the lessons of human survival in stone and shadow. To imagine a civilization beneath the earth, not just surviving for a short time, but truly living, we have to think about what people would actually need. Not the romantic image of vast glowing caverns and secret kingdoms, but the day-to-day necessities of human survival. Because myths can paint pictures of hidden utopias, but in reality, life requires food, water, shelter, light, air, and a way to hold communities together. If any of those are missing, no amount of legend can make the underground sustainable. The most immediate need is air. On the surface, we take it for granted. Underground, air is more fragile. Caves can trap carbon dioxide. Fires can consume oxygen. And without circulation, the atmosphere quickly becomes unbreathable. So, any society underground would need reliable ventilation. Natural cracks and fissures can carry air in and out. But humans would likely have to expand those passages, building shafts that allow gases to escape. Some ancient mines had surprisingly sophisticated systems for this, using the natural movement of warm and cool air to keep tunnels ventilated. For an entire community, that knowledge would be even more critical. Next comes water. No human group lasts long without it. Fortunately, underground systems are rich in water sources. Aquifers stretch beneath continents. Rivers carve through stone and pools collect from dripping ceilings. But not all water underground is safe. Minerals, sulfur, or bacteria can contaminate it. People would need methods of filtration, boiling, or using certain types of stone to purify what they drank. And since water flow underground can be seasonal or unpredictable, storage would be essential. Cisterns carved from stone, perhaps lined with clay, could hold reserves against droughts. Food is where things become most challenging. On the surface, agriculture relies on sunlight, and large animals graze on fields. Underground, neither is available. So what then? Mushrooms provide one solution. They grow in darkness, feeding on decayed organic matter. Early underground dwellers could cultivate them deliberately, perhaps learning to spread spores on compost heaps. Insects provide another. Crickets or beetles can be bred on scraps, and though unappealing to many of us now, they provide rich protein. Fish in subterranean rivers could be caught, and over time selectively bred to suit human needs. Small mammals adapted to caves might also be domesticated, though that would require generations of patience. Beyond that, trade with the surface might have been necessary. Even if a society wanted to remain hidden, occasional foray upward to gather plants, seeds, or animals might have been unavoidable. This doesn't make the idea less plausible. Many myths of underground civilizations speak of them sending envoys or wanderers to the surface. Perhaps what sounded like legend was partly the memory of practical exchanges. Light is another need, though maybe not in the way we first think. Humans don't require constant light to live, but they do need it to work, cook, build, and feel oriented. Torches provide a short-term solution, though smoke becomes an issue. Oil lamps, if they discovered a way to extract or render fuel, might have been more efficient. Natural solutions exist too. Bioluminescent fungi, insects or fish can give faint light. Even if weak, such sources could be cultivated in large numbers. Imagine caverns glowing with colonies of luminous mushrooms, providing just enough light to navigate. Not bright daylight, but a steady glow that made life possible. Shelter would be perhaps the simplest requirement since caves already provide walls and roofs, but making them livable would take effort. Floors would need to be leveled, dampness managed, and fire controlled. Some chambers might flood, others collapse, so choosing safe spaces would matter. And as communities grew, people would have to carve new tunnels, expand chambers, and build supports. Ancient miners were already capable of these feats, so it isn't hard to picture underground societies learning to shape their environments into homes, halls, and communal spaces. Sanitation is another detail often overlooked. Waste, if not managed, would poison the air and water. So, systems for removing or repurposing it would be necessary. Composting could turn organic waste into material for mushrooms or insects. Latrines could be placed where underground streams would carry waste away. Without such systems, no group could last long. But beyond physical needs, humans require something else: community and culture. People do not survive on calories and air alone. They need cooperation, rules, rituals, and stories to give meaning to life. Underground, this need would be amplified. In a world of darkness and silence, shared songs, myths, and traditions would bind people together. Ceremonies around fire or glowing fungi could become the center of social life. Stories of ancestors, heroes, or gods might serve not only to explain their world, but to make it feel livable. Time would be another challenge. Without sunlight, people lose track of days. Experiments have shown that in caves, sleep cycles drift. Some people settle into 25 or 26-hour days. Others lose track entirely. So, an underground civilization would need ways of keeping time. Perhaps water clocks. Perhaps routines marked by communal meals or rituals. Even today, isolated groups like submariners use artificial schedules to maintain order. Without such anchors, life becomes disorienting. Psychology cannot be ignored. Humans crave light, space, and variety. Underground monotony might weigh heavily, but communities can adapt. Art carved into walls, music echoing through tunnels, or festivals centered around glowing chambers could bring color into the darkness. And over generations, what feels like deprivation to us might feel like normally to them. Children raised in caves would not miss the sky they had never seen. Instead, they would find beauty in the textures of stone, the rhythm of dripping water, the shimmer of crystals. Safety from predators would be another concern. Caves are not empty. Snakes, bats, insects, and even large animals sometimes dwell there. Early humans or civilizations underground would have to defend themselves. Fire helps keep many creatures away, as does noise and presence. In time, societies might push deeper into isolated areas where large predators never reach, carving spaces that belonged only to them. Resources for tools and building would also matter. Stone, of course, would be plentiful. Bones from animals, wood from occasional forays to the surface, or even crystals and metals from mining could provide what they needed. Underground, minerals are abundant. A civilization could mine iron, copper, or other materials to craft tools. This could even give them an advantage over surface societies if they learn to work with or OES hidden beneath, while others remain dependent on surface materials. So when we ask what people would need to survive underground, the list is long but not impossible. Air, water, food, light, shelter, sanitation, culture, time, safety, and resources. None of these are beyond human capacity. Some are harder than others, but history shows that people adapt to extreme environments. Deserts, Arctic tundra, high mountains, each seems inhospitable until people figure out how to bend it to their needs. The underground would be another such challenge, and perhaps what matters most is not whether each of these needs could be met, but whether they could be balanced. Underground societies would live on a knife's edge, where one mistake in water, air, or food might collapse the whole system. This might explain why myths describe underground civilizations as disciplined, enlightened, or advanced. To survive below, you would have to be. Chaos would destroy you. Balance would preserve you. So, yes, it is possible. The science of caves, the history of human ingenuity, and the resilience of life itself all suggest it could work. It would not look like our surface civilization, sprawling and abundant. It would be smaller, stricter, more careful, but it would be real. A society shaped by stone and silence, thriving in a world without sky. And once we imagine that, the question grows larger. Not just what people would need, but how they would arrange their lives, how they would build homes, how they would shape their world into something livable and meaningful. Because survival is only the beginning. Civilization is more than endurance. It is architecture, culture, and imagination. When we think about building a life underground, perhaps the hardest part to picture is how people would provide themselves with food, water, and energy. On the surface, these things are everywhere. Rain falls from the sky, rivers run across the land, crops grow in fields, animals graze on grass. The sun itself pours out energy each morning, free and abundant, the quiet engine behind all life as we know it. Underground, none of that is obvious. No sun, no open rivers, no fields of wheat stretching out to the horizon. Yet, if we look closer, we find that each of these essentials has its counterpart in the depths. Harder to manage, perhaps, but not impossible. Begin with food. For most of human history, food has been tied to sunlight. Plants capture light, animals eat the plants, and we eat both. Remove the sun and that familiar cycle collapses. But underground, other cycles exist. Fungi thrive in darkness, breaking down matter into nutrients. Mushrooms can be cultivated deliberately, fed with compost, wood, or even dung. In some cultures, on the surface, mushrooms were already prized sources of food. So, it isn't hard to imagine an underground society leaning on them as a staple. Insects provide another path. Crickets, beetles, and mealworms grow quickly, eat little, and provide rich protein. While modern tastes may resist the idea, many cultures around the world have relied on insects for nutrition. Underground, such a system would make even more sense. Easy to breed, easy to feed, and perfectly adapted to small, dark spaces. And underground people might consider insects as ordinary as we consider bread or rice. Fish also live underground. Blind cave fish are found in rivers and lakes sealed off from the surface. Some societies could have caught these fish and learned to manage their populations. With time, they might even domesticate them, creating ponds or channels where fish could be raised intentionally. This would provide not just protein, but fat, essential for survival in a diet otherwise limited to mushrooms and insects. Animals would be harder, but not impossible. Small mammals like rats or rabbits, if introduced underground, could adapt. Generations of selective breeding might turn them into useful livestock. Perhaps goats or sheep were once brought down to provide milk and meat. We don't know. But the principle is simple. Wherever people go, they find ways to bring food with them, to bend the environment to sustain them. Then there are plants. And here the question is tricky. Most plants require sunlight, but some can grow in very low light or with substitutes. If underground people discovered glowing fungi or managed to capture bioluminescent organisms, perhaps they could nurture small plants. More realistically, they might build systems that relied on trade, occasionally gathering seeds or grains from the surface. Myths often speak of underground dwellers who interact with the surface world only rarely, as if they emerge to collect something precious. Maybe food was one reason why. So food, though difficult, has solutions. Not the abundance of the surface, but enough to endure. Mushrooms, insects, fish, small animals, occasional plants, and clever management. Water, meanwhile, is actually more plentiful underground than many imagine. Aquifers stretch like hidden oceans below us, vast reserves trapped in stone. Caves often contain rivers and lakes slowly fed by rain filtering from above. Drip water can be collected, and with proper storage it can last through dry periods. The challenge is not availability, but purity. Some underground water is rich in minerals, even poisonous. Sulfur springs, iron-rich pools, or stagnant water could make people sick, so filtration would be essential. Sand, charcoal, or even certain types of stone can filter water. Boiling provides another solution if fuel is available. Underground, people would have learned by trial and error which sources to trust. Another issue is transportation. Rivers underground can be narrow or dangerous, so carrying water to communities would require containers, channels, or systems. Clay, stone, or even animal skins could be used. In some myths, Underground cities are described as being built around great lakes or rivers, as though proximity to water was the deciding factor for settlement. This makes sense. Water dictates where people live above or below. Energy is perhaps the most fascinating puzzle. On the surface, energy comes from the sun, from wind, from flowing rivers. Underground, none of these apply. So, what then could a civilization rely on? The most obvious answer is fire. Wood carried from the surface, or peat or coal if they learn to extract it, could provide heat and light. Fire is dangerous in enclosed spaces, but with ventilation systems it can be managed. Beyond fire there are subtler sources. Bioluminescence could provide light, though not strong enough for heavy work. Glowing fungi or insects could create atmosphere orientation, and even ritual significance. Geothermal energy might play a role too. Underground, heat seeps from the Earth's core. Hot springs, steam vents, or warm rock could provide natural heating. Some societies might have learned to use these, channeling steam to cook food or warm chambers. And then there is human energy. In the absence of abundant resources, people themselves become the engines. Muscle power organized into routines can grind grain, pump water, or carry supplies. In an underground society, cooperation would not just be social, but mechanical. Many hands working together to replace the absent energy of the sun. Imagine, for example, a great hall lit by faintly glowing fungi with people gathered to share food of mushrooms, fish, and insects. Drinking from cisterns filled by dripping water, warmed by stone that holds geothermal heat. Above them, unseen, the sun shines for other societies. But below, life continues, self-sustaining, fragile yet enduring. Of course, survival underground would never be easy. Food supplies would need constant management. Water systems would need protection from contamination. Energy would always be limited. But humans are problem solvers. And the myths of underground civilizations suggest they were imagined as disciplined, careful, and wise, precisely because those traits would be necessary. Waste, greed, or recklessness would destroy them. Balance, patience, and cooperation would keep them alive. So when we think of food, water, and energy without the sky, the question becomes not whether they are possible, but how carefully they can be sustained. The underground is stingy. It offers little abundance, but it does offer enough. And sometimes enough is all that is required for life to persist. And once those basics are secured, people can begin to build culture, architecture, and stories. Once bellies are full and thirst is quenched, once warmth keeps out the chill, imagination flourishes. Food, water, and energy are the foundation. What rises from them is everything else that makes a civilization. If people truly lived beneath the surface, one of the first things they would have to decide is how to shape their spaces. Caves provide natural shelter, but they are rarely comfortable. Floors are uneven, ceilings drip, walls close in at odd angles. A family might endure such a space for a season. But a civilization requires something more deliberate. So the story of an underground people would also be the story of architecture, of how they carved homes of stone and silence into livable places. Stone is unforgiving, but it is also patient. Unlike wood, it does not rot quickly. Unlike mud, it does not wash away with rain. To work with stone is to think in centuries rather than seasons. For underground societies, this permanence would be both gift and challenge. Tools would wear down. Labor would be immense, but once a chamber was carved, it could last for generations. Whole families could be born and die in the same hollow, leaving marks on the walls as their only trace. The first structures might have been simple adjustments, smoothing a floor so people could sleep more comfortably, piling stones to create a hearth for fire, digging shallow drains so water dripping from the ceiling did not flood a chamber. Over time, these adjustments would grow more ambitious. Tunnels straightened, rooms expanded, niches carved into walls for storage. Even the act of sitting together might encourage builders to widen a chamber, creating gathering spaces that could hold dozens at once. Ventilation would guide architecture as much as comfort. Without careful design, smoke would suffocate people, so shafts would have to be carved, slanted in ways that drew air upward. Passages might be oriented to encourage drafts, letting fresh air flow while stale air escaped. Some ancient mines already display such sophistication. suggesting that even without modern science, people knew how to coax air through stone. Sound, too, would shape underground spaces. In a cave, sound echoes strangely. A whisper can carry farther than expected. For a community, this could be either a blessing or a burden. Walls might be thickened to quiet sleeping areas. Communal halls might be carved where acoustics made songs and speeches carry beautifully. Perhaps rituals were designed with this in mind. Chants and drums echoing through stone to create a sense of power and belonging. Light would be precious and architecture would adapt to it. Chambers near entrances might be used for daily work, taking advantage of what little natural light filters in. Deeper spaces lit only by torches or glowing fungi would be reserved for storage, rest or ritual. Niches and walls could hold lamps. Ceilings might be darkened with soot, absorbing smoke and preventing reflections that irritated eyes. Over time, people would learn how to place light sources to balance brightness and shadow, turning darkness into something manageable rather than oppressive. As communities grew, organization would become necessary. Families might cluster around central halls, their living spaces branching like roots from a main stem. Shared facilities, systems, storerooms, meeting chambers would anchor the design. Paths would be widened to allow travel, walls marked to guide the way. Underground architecture often resembles labyrinths, but for those who live in them, they are maps of memory. Every twist and corner becomes familiar, named and woven into story. Safety from collapse would be another concern. Unsupported ceilings can fall, crushing everything beneath, so pillars would be left standing, natural stone left in place as ribs to hold the weight. Some cultures might even carve pillars deliberately, shaping them into symbolic forms, animals, ancestors, gods, turning necessity into art. In this way, architecture underground would merge function and meaning. Water management would be central. Chambers prone to flooding might be abandoned or repurposed as siestiens. Channels could be cut into floors to divert water towards storage pools. Dripstone formations might even be integrated into design, their steady flow becoming a feature rather than a nuisance. To live underground is to live with water as constant companion, and architecture would reflect that. Heat or its absence would also matter. Stone is slow to change temperature, so deep chambers remain cool even in summer. Fires would warm central areas, but insulation might require walls of clay, woven mats, or animal skins hung across openings. In especially deep places where geothermal heat seeps upward, architecture might even take advantage of warm stone floors, using them as natural hearths. As the society matured, architecture could become increasingly symbolic. Just as cathedrals on the surface reached upward toward heaven, underground halls might be carved downward or inward, as gestures of connection to the earth itself. Spirals, domes, or vast vaulted chambers might serve not only practical needs, but spiritual ones. Art would cover the walls, paintings, carvings, etchings that told stories of ancestors, myths, or daily life. Each mark would be a way of softening stone, of turning it into something human. Storage, too, would drive design. Grain, dried mushrooms, or preserved meat would need to be kept safe from dampness and pests. Sealed alos might be carved high in walls, accessible only by ladders. Pits might be dug and lined with clay to hold reserves. The architecture of survival is often invisible. Not grand halls, but the careful, practical spaces where food, water, and tools are safeguarded. Communication would also shape construction. Long tunnels can disorient. Without markers, it is easy to become lost. So walls might be carved with symbols, lines pointing toward water, spirals leading to central halls, handprints marking family areas. These are more than decorations. They are maps, guides, and warnings. The architecture itself becomes a language passed from one generation to the next. And perhaps most fascinating is the silence. Above ground, the world is filled with constant noise, wind, birds, rivers, storms. Underground, silence dominates. Every sound becomes significant. Architecture in such a world would be designed not only for space but for sound. The way footsteps carry, the way voices echo, the way a drip of water punctuates quiet. These would all be felt deeply. Walls might be carved to absorb sound where privacy was needed, or shaped to amplify it where gatherings took place. Silence itself becomes part of the building material. Over generations, these spaces would become more than shelters. They would become cities in stone. Not cities like ours with towers and streets, but networks of chambers and tunnels, layered and connected, organic yet purposeful. To walk through them would be to walk through the memory of a people, every wall bearing marks of labour, belief and adaptation. And in imagining this, we realize that underground architecture is not only possible, but inevitable. Once people decide to stay below, the environment demands it. Caves alone cannot sustain. They must be shaped, expanded, maintained. And in that shaping culture emerges. A home is never just stone. It is the rhythm of life embedded in stone. So when we picture homes of stone and silence, we picture more than walls. We picture the hum of a community, the glow of faint lights, the steady drip of water, the warmth of a fire shielded by careful vents. We picture people carving, not just for survival, but for belonging, turning the underground into a world of their own making. And when all the practical needs are met, when air flows, water is stored, food is protected, and halls echo with voices, the next question becomes how these people would connect with one another. Because architecture provides the space, but communication provides the society. And underground, without stars or horizons, communication itself would become something different, something shaped by the closeness of stone and the endlessness of darkness. When we imagine people living beneath the surface, we often think about what they would eat, how they would build their homes, or where their water might come from. But another question runs quietly beneath all of these, and it may be just as important. How would they communicate in a world without stars? Because communication is not just about words or messages. It is about orientation, memory, cooperation, and identity. On the surface, we communicate through shared reference points. The rising sun tells us morning has come. The seasons mark the passing of time. Stars provide navigation. Birds, rivers, and wind carry signals that shape how we speak and how we imagine. Underground, all of those vanish. So, how would people create systems of connection when the sky is gone? Start with sound. Underground, vision is limited. Light is rare and precious. So, sound becomes central. The way a footstep echoes down a tunnel can tell you how wide it is, how close you are to a chamber, even if someone else is approaching. Voices carry far in caves, but they bend around corners, distorting words. So people would have to learn how to shape their speech slower, clearer, with pauses that let echoes fade before the next thought. Entire dialects might form around the acoustics of stone. A surface visitor might find the speech of underground dwellers strangely paced, but within the caves it would be perfectly natural. Beyond spoken language, sound can be structured into signals. A struck stone, a hollow drum, a clap of hands, all can travel down tunnels. Different rhythms could carry different meanings. Danger, welcome, gathering, or ritual. This is not guesswork. Many cultures on the surface use drums to send messages across distances, and caves would magnify that possibility. An underground community might develop a rich language of sound that allowed people to coordinate, even when far apart in darkness. Whistles could serve a similar role. High-pitched tones travel differently through narrow passages, carrying farther than speech. Some shepherds on the surface already use whistle languages to communicate across valleys. Underground, such a system would be even more useful. A few notes could tell you who is coming, where water is found, or which direction to follow. Touch would also become a form of communication. When vision is scarce, the hand becomes a guide. Walls can be carved with textures, smooth for safe paths, rough for dangerous ones, spirals for gathering halls. Travelers could read these with their fingertips as easily as we read street signs. Families might leave unique marks, a series of lines or dots to claim a space as theirs. Communication through touch extends beyond walls. Handshakes, embraces, or the brushing of fingers could carry deep meaning in a place where faces are not always visible. Symbols would play a major role. Carved into stone, painted with minerals, or arranged with stacked rocks, they would serve as markers for direction, property, or belief. In caves around the world, prehistoric people left handprints, animals, and abstract patterns. These were not random. They were messages to others, expressions of identity or ways of connecting across time. An underground civilization would likely expand this practice, turning every chamber into a canvas of communication. Light itself could become a signal, a torch waved in a certain pattern, a lamp covered and uncovered, a glowing fungus arranged in a circle. All could carry meaning. In darkness, the smallest light becomes significant. Entire systems of signals might evolve, like our use of lanterns at sea or smoke on mountain tops. Storytelling would be another essential tool. Without stars to mark the passage of seasons, without a horizon to remind people of direction, stories would hold the role of memory. Through stories, people would remember where water was found, which tunnels led to collapse, or how ancestors survived in hard times. These stories would not be entertainment alone. They would be practical maps and instruction manuals wrapped in narrative so they could be remembered and passed on. Song would expand this role. Music carries emotion, but also information. A song about a journey can include directions. A chant can mark the rhythm of work. A lullaby can encode cultural values. Underground, songs would echo through chambers shared by many at once, reinforcing not only memory but unity. Time itself would be communicated differently. Without stars or sunlight, natural cues vanish. So time would have to be constructed socially. People would gather for meals, rituals, or tasks at agreed intervals. Bells, drums, or other signals might mark these divisions. Time becomes a matter of collective agreement, communicated constantly, reinforced by routine. Writing, if it developed, would have a different emphasis underground. Rather than paper or parchment, stone and clay would dominate. Inscriptions carved deep into walls would last centuries. Clay tablets could be baked near fire pits, preserving records. Symbols might evolve not only to mark language but to map space, turning architecture into text. The lack of stars changes more than navigation. It changes imagination. The sky provides metaphors, myths, and aspirations. Underground, communication would draw instead from stone, water, and silence. Stories might describe ancestors as rivers or gods as glowing crystals. Metaphors would be tactile and auditory rather than celestial. When people spoke of destiny, they might speak of tunnels branching or chambers opening, not of stars guiding their way. Conflict and diplomacy would also rely on communication. In close quarters, misunderstandings could be dangerous, so systems of mediation, ritualized speech, or carefully structured debate might emerge. Perhaps communities used long pauses in speech to allow echoes to fade, preventing heated exchanges from turning chaotic. Silence itself might become part of communication, a respected space for thought and calm. Even the way people name themselves could be shaped by environment. In darkness, visual identity matters less. Names might be linked to sound, voices, rhythms, or songs. A person might be known for the way they tap a pattern on stone or for the tone of their whistle. Families might pass down unique rhythms as signatures recognizable in complete darkness. Imagine a society where meetings are held in large, echoing chambers. Leaders do not speak quickly but slowly, letting each word settle. Listeners close their eyes, absorbing not just the content, but the rhythm and weight of speech. Decisions are made not by loud voices drowning others, but by carefully measured exchanges, where silence is as meaningful as sound. This is not fantasy. It is adaptation, communication shaped by stone. Trade with the surface would complicate this. How would underground people signal to those above without exposing themselves? Perhaps through hidden shafts where sound could be sent upward. Perhaps through symbols carved on stones left at meeting places. Secrecy would matter. Communication would need to balance openness and protection. And then there is the question of memory across generations. Oral traditions would be strong, but inscriptions would anchor them. Marks carved into stone, repeated symbols, songs rehearsed by entire groups. These would ensure continuity. In a world without stars, where the sky does not remind you of eternity, permanence must be carved and sung. So when we think about communication underground, it is not limited to speech. It is sound, touch, light, symbol, story, and ritual. It is the entire web of signals that allow humans to share space and meaning. The absence of stars removes one layer, but it does not silence humanity. If anything, it deepens the role of every other form of connection. And once communication is established, once people have found ways to make themselves heard and remembered in darkness, the next challenge arises. How does living in endless night shape the mind itself? Because architecture and communication solve physical and social needs. But psychology is another matter. What happens when generations grow up without ever seeing the sky, without knowing morning or evening, without feeling the sun on their faces to survive underground, is not just about finding food, storing water, or carving holes in stone. The greater challenge may be the mind. Humans evolved under the open sky, guided by light and shadow, warmed by the sun, cooled by the moon. Every instinct, every rhythm of our bodies is tuned to cycles of day and night. Remove those cycles and the world of the mind begins to shift. So the psychology of endless night is not just an interesting side note. It may be the deciding factor in whether an underground civilization could endure for generations. Experiments on the surface already give us clues. When people are isolated in caves with no sunlight, their sense of time drifts. Some begin to sleep in cycles longer than 24 hours, drifting into 25 or 26. Others lose track altogether, sleeping when tired, waking when they feel like it until their schedule no longer matches anything recognizable. Days stretch into weeks without shape. Without the sun, the body loses its anchor. Underground, people would have to invent new anchors, artificial rhythms to hold themselves together. But time is only one part. The absence of light itself has profound effects. Light is not just a way of seeing. It regulates hormones, moods, and sleep. Without it, depression and lethargy can grow. People lose energy, motivation, and joy. For an underground society, this could become a constant battle. How do you keep spirits alive in a world without dawn? One answer is artificial light. Torches, lamps, glowing fungi. Even reflections of polished stone could help. But another answer lies in culture. Music, ritual, art, and storytelling can act as emotional light, filling the void left by the absent sun. Silence, too, has psychological weight. Above ground, the world hums with sound, wind through trees, birds calling, rivers running. Underground, silence dominates, broken only by water drips, footsteps, or voices. Silence can soothe, but it can also oppress. Long enough, it becomes heavy, pressing on the mind. So, underground people would need ways to fill silence with meaning. Songs sung in groups, chants echoing in halls, instruments carved from bone or stone. The sound would not just entertain, it would reassure. It would remind people they were not alone. Then there is space. Humans are used to horizons. The sight of distance calms us, gives perspective. Underground, walls are close. Ceilings hang low. For some, this would feel secure, like being embraced. For others, it would feel suffocating, a constant pressure. Over generations, people might adapt. Children raised underground might find open spaces overwhelming rather than comforting. But still, the absence of horizons would shape psychology. Imagination might expand where vision contracts. People might dream of vast halls, gods of infinite chambers, or legends of hidden skies beneath the earth. Fear of the unknown would also be amplified. On the surface, danger often approaches from a distance, visible before it strikes. Underground, danger lurks around every corner. A tunnel might collapse. A predator might hide in shadows. Even another group of people could emerge suddenly from the dark. This uncertainty breeds vigilance, and vigilance, if constant, becomes anxiety. To manage this, underground communities would need trust and cooperation. Shared rituals, mutual reliance, and clear systems of protection would help reduce fear. Isolation is another threat. Underground spaces can cut groups off from one another. A collapse might separate families for days or weeks. Loneliness in such an environment can be devastating. So, communication systems, sounds, signals, rituals of gathering would be vital. Psychology thrives not just on safety, but on connection. People need to know they belong, that others will come for them if danger strikes. Dreams themselves might shift. Sleep underground is different. No sunrise wakes you. No sunset reminds you to rest. Dreams might become longer, stranger, filled with imagery drawn from stone, water, and shadow. Myths could grow from these dreams. Whole cosmology is born of subconscious efforts to make sense of endless night. Perhaps underground societies imagined gods not as figures in the sky, but as presences in the stone. Perhaps their underworld was not a metaphor, but a direct reflection of the only world they knew. Mental illness would be a real challenge. Depression, anxiety, and disorientation would threaten survival. But culture is medicine. Art, ritual, and social structure can protect the mind. Underground societies might create elaborate ceremonies around light, sound, and storytelling, designed to maintain emotional balance. Fire festivals to mimic sunrise, chants to regulate group rhythm, stories to give hope and direction. There is also resilience to consider. Humans are adaptable. What feels unbearable to one generation can become normal to the next. Children raised underground would not miss the sun they never saw. Their world would be stone, water, and fire. Their minds would shape themselves to that reality. Imagination would fill gaps. Perhaps they would dream of glowing rivers, crystal heavens, or gods of eternal night. Their psychology would not be broken by absence. It would be remade by it. And yet, even with adaptation, the longing for the surface might linger. Some would dream of a light they had never seen. Myths might carry fragments of memory from ancestors who once lived above. Psychology is not only shaped by environment, but by story, and stories of another world, brighter and freer, would pull at the mind. Some would treat it as myth, others as destiny. Either way, it would colour their sense of who they were. Discipline would likely be stronger underground. When survival depends on cooperation, rules tighten. Chaos cannot be afforded. Psychology under such pressure becomes more collective. Individuality is still there, but it bends toward the needs of the group. Rituals of obedience, respect, and order might become central, not because people are less human, but because the environment punishes disorder. Imagination would flourish in unique ways. Deprived of the sky, people might turn inward, finding vast universes in dreams, art, and story. Silence and darkness often spark creativity. Cave paintings from our ancestors prove this. In deep darkness, they painted animals, hands, and symbols, creating meaning where none was given. An underground civilization would do the same, not as luxury, but as necessity. Art becomes a stabilizer, a mirror for the mind. And then there is hope. Psychology needs hope as much as it needs food or water. Hope for survival, hope for tomorrow, hope for meaning. Underground, hope might take the form of legends about hidden skies deeper down, or prophecies about returning to the surface. Even if never fulfilled, such stories give direction. They keep despair at bay. So the psychology of endless night is not simple. It contains fear, depression, and longing, but also resilience, imagination, and adaptation. It is a double-edged world, fragile but full of potential. Underground, the mind would bend to survive, reshaping itself as surely as people reshape stone. And when minds adapt, when communities create rituals and culture to sustain themselves, the question becomes how they organize that culture. Because psychology is about individuals, but civilization is about groups. And in the endless night, groups would have to find ways to rule, to share, to live together without tearing themselves apart. When people gather in large numbers, rules emerge. Sometimes they are spoken, sometimes they are only understood, but they are always there. A family can live without them, but a civilization cannot. Survival underground would depend not only on food and water, not only on air and architecture, but on how people agree to live together. The stone itself would enforce certain laws. Space is limited, resources are fragile, mistakes are costly. But beyond those natural pressures, people would need to decide how to share, how to lead, and how to prevent chaos from tearing them apart. The first step toward organization might have been necessity. In small groups, decisions are often made by consensus or by whoever shows the strongest personality. But underground, the The margin for error is narrow. One person hoarding food, one family wasting water, one reckless. Fire could put everyone at risk. So leadership would be more than authority. It would be responsibility. Leaders might be chosen not for strength or wealth, but for wisdom, patience, and reliability. Those who could think carefully, who could balance needs fairly, would rise naturally. Elders would likely play a central role. In darkness, memory is survival. The older generation remembers which tunnels collapsed, which waters turned poisonous, which rituals kept people steady. Their authority would not only be respected, it would be vital. A society underground might have developed a council of elders, each voice carrying the weight of years. Decisions would not be rushed. Pauses would stretch. Words weighed carefully. In a world of silence, wisdom is slow, and patience becomes law. Division of labor would also emerge quickly. Underground life does not allow for everyone to do everything. Some would manage water, checking cisterns and channels. Others would cultivate mushrooms, tend insects, or fish in hidden streams. Builders would carve new chambers, strengthen old ones. Guards would watch for predators, intruders, or signs of collapse. Storytellers, singers, and spiritual leaders would maintain morale. Specialization would not be luxury. It would be the glue that held the community together. Rules around resources would likely be strict. On the surface, abundance allows for waste, but underground, every scrap matters. Food would be rationed, water distributed according to need, energy carefully saved. Punishments for breaking these rules might be severe, not out of cruelty, but out of necessity. To steal food underground is not just theft, it is endangering lives. Such societies might develop codes of fairness so ingrained that they feel sacred. Sharing becomes more than kindness, it becomes survival. Conflict, of course, would still exist. Humans argue, compete, and resent no matter the environment. But underground conflict cannot be allowed to fester. Walls are too close, voices too loud, lives too interdependent. So systems of resolution would have to be formal, rituals of mediation, circles of dialogue, or decisions handed down by councils. Exile might be the harshest punishment, for to cast someone into deeper darkness without support would be worse than death. Religion or belief systems might intertwine deeply with organization. Leaders may not only govern but also guide spiritually, reinforcing rules with myth and ritual. Ceremonies around fire, water, or glowing fungi could remind people of their dependence on one another and on the environment. Moral codes might be framed as sacred obligations, not just practical ones. In this way, survival rules would become cultural laws carried from generation to generation, not as commands, but as traditions. Trade and cooperation between groups would also matter. If multiple underground communities existed, how would they interact? Tunnels might connect different halls, rivers might run between them, alliances could form, exchanging food, tools, or stories. But mistrust would be natural too. Secrecy protects survival. The balance between openness and isolation would shape politics. Perhaps rituals of trust evolved. Long greetings spoken slowly to prove identity or symbolic gifts exchanged to show goodwill. Population control might be another necessity. In closed systems, growth without limit leads to disaster. Underground societies might establish customs that regulate family size, whether through delayed marriage, shared child-rearing, or religious restrictions. Life underground would require balance, not only in resources but in numbers. Organization would also extend to knowledge. Who remembers the safe tunnels? Who knows how to build supports? Who understands which fungi heal and which poison? Such knowledge cannot be hoarded. It must be taught, shared, and preserved. Education might be communal, with children learning from elders in groups, stories woven with practical lessons. Knowledge becomes collective property, another form of survival. Architecture itself would reflect organization. Central halls for councils, smaller chambers for families, storage rooms protected by community guards, paths carefully mapped, doors or barriers marking boundaries. Space underground is not infinite, so every chamber must be accounted for. Organization is literally carved into stone. Imagination might also shape governance. Myths could legitimize leaders, telling stories of ancestors chosen by gods or by the earth itself. Rituals of succession might involve symbolic journeys through tunnels, trials of patience, or demonstrations of wisdom. Leadership underground would not just be practical, it would be theatrical, reaffirming order through ceremony. Gender roles, too, might take unique forms. In many surface societies, roles were shaped by access to fields, hunting grounds, or warfare. Underground, the division might shift. Those skilled at navigating tunnels, calming disputes, or preserving resources could hold high status regardless of gender. Labor would be valued for survival, not for tradition. Who could carve stone? Who could heal? Who could guide? These would matter more than anything else. Defense from outsiders would shape politics as well. If underground societies feared discovery, secrecy would be a law unto itself. Children might be taught never to reveal their home to strangers. Tunnels might be hidden, entrances disguised. Guards might patrol the boundaries silently, ready to extinguish light at the first sign of intrusion. The politics of survival would be the politics of concealment, and yet for all the discipline and strictness, there would also be space for celebration. Festivals, songs, and rituals give life meaning beyond survival. Communities might gather to honor water, to celebrate births, to mark harvests of fungi or fish. In those moments, organization would loosen into joy, reminding people why they endure. Celebration is, itself, a form of governance reinforcing unity through shared emotion. So, how might civilization organize underground? It would be a blend of necessity and creativity of strict rules and shared rituals, elders guiding with memory councils making slow, careful decisions, labor divided by skill, resources rationed with fairness, conflicts resolved through ritual, religion binding it all together, secrecy guarding the edges, and celebration giving it breath. What emerges is not a chaotic collection of survivors, but a disciplined, ordered, resilient people. Their rules may seem harsh to us, but to them they would be natural, the shape of life carved into stone. And once rules are in place, once survival is structured, another question opens. How would these underground people view the surface world? Would they see it as paradise, as danger, as myth, or as temptation? Because organization is about order inside. But every order must also decide what lies outside. Technology does not always mean machines, engines, or electricity. It means the ways people bend their environment to survive. It means the tools they craft, the systems they invent, the clever shortcuts that turn weakness into strength. Above ground, technology grew in partnership with the sun, the wind, the open field, and the flowing river. Underground, it would grow in the absence of all of those things. So technology born from darkness would not look like ours. It would not rise in towers of glass or spread across fields of metal. It would be shaped by stone, water, silence, and the constant need to stretch resources as far as possible. Fire is the most obvious place to begin. Without sunlight, fire is both light and life. The first underground people who learned how to manage it would have transformed their world, not just keeping warm, but cooking food, driving away predators, hardening clay, and giving themselves something more important than all of that, a rhythm. Fire marks time. The lighting of a flame signals beginning. Its fading marks an end. Underground, fire would become more than a tool. It would be a clock, a symbol, and a form of power in itself. But fire underground is dangerous. Smoke suffocates, heat builds, oxygen is consumed. So the technology of fire would not only be about making it, but controlling it. Ventilation shafts carved with precision, chambers designed to pull smoke upward, fuels chosen carefully to minimize choking fumes. Perhaps families passed down secret methods for fire management, songs that guided the tending of flames, stories that warned of disasters when it was misused. Fire technology and darkness would be less about spark and more about mastery. Lighting beyond fire would take on new forms. Glowing fungi exist on the surface, faint but steady. In caves, they could be cultivated, spread across walls to create a ghostly glow. Certain insects produce light. their bodies filled with natural lanterns. Perhaps underground people learned to keep them in containers, feeding them, breeding them, creating swarms of tiny lights that hovered like stars. Minerals, too, can reflect or even store faint light. Polished crystals arranged in clever ways might scatter a single flame into a chamber-wide glow. None of this would be bright like the sun, but underground brightness is relative. Even a flicker feels like brilliance in total dark. Tools would follow naturally. Stone is abundant underground, harder to shape than wood, but more durable. Chisels, hammers, and wedges would be refined over generations. Sharp edges for carving tunnels, flat edges for smoothing walls, small implements for delicate work like carving symbols or crafting ornaments. Bone could supplement where stone failed. Light, flexible, and useful for needles, hooks, or points. Metals, if discovered, would change everything. Even small veins of copper or iron could revolutionize survival, allowing stronger tools, sharper weapons, sturdier supports. Mining is itself a form of underground technology, so perhaps such societies became natural metallurgists long before surface people did. Transportation in tunnels would demand innovation. Narrow passages prevent carts or wagons, so goods would be carried on backs in baskets woven from roots or fibers, carried down from the surface. Sleds might slide over smooth stone floors. Ropes braided from hair or plant fibers would haul heavy loads. In vertical shafts, pulley systems might emerge, simple at first, but increasingly sophisticated. Imagine an underground chamber with ropes stretching upward, weights balanced, goods moving smoothly from one level to another, all powered by human muscle and careful design. Storage would be another crucial technology. In darkness, rotten dampness threatened supplies, so people would carve sealed chambers, line them with clay, and create systems of airflow to keep food dry. Mushrooms might be dried near fire pits, fish smoked slowly, grains stored in clay jars. Preservation techniques would become as important as production. Perhaps underground societies invented fermentation early, discovering that foods could last longer and taste richer when transformed by microbes. Fermentation not only preserves but creates alcohol, and alcohol can act as medicine, ritual tool, or simply comfort in long winters of stone. Communication technology too would develop. Sound travels far underground, but uncontrolled it distorts. So underground people might have built resonant stones carved in such a way that a strike carried a clear tone down a tunnel. Drums could be placed at intervals, their beats relayed from hall to hall. Marks on walls would serve as maps. Torches waved in patterns could signal across chambers. These are not the machines we think of today, but they are systems carefully refined, shaped by generations of trial and error. Medicine would be born from darkness as well. Many fungi and minerals have medicinal properties. Some kill, others heal. Careful observation, carried from generation to generation, could produce a body of knowledge as deep as any surface herbalism. Pickaces made from moss, infusions from roots carried below, or mineral scrapes dissolved in water, all could treat illness and injury. Underground societies might revere healers, those who could read the silent language of fungi and stone. Energy beyond fire might also be tapped. Underground rivers can turn wheels. Even if crude, water-driven mills could grind grain, pump water, or power simple tools, geothermal heat could be harnessed too. Steam rising from vents might be trapped, used to cook food or warm chambers. These technologies would not look like engines or turbines. They would look like stone basins, carved channels, carefully placed stones guiding the flow of heat and water. Simple but revolutionary for those who lived there. Clothing and materials would show ingenuity as well. Animal skins brought from the surface could be used, but underground societies would need more sustainable options. Fungi like mycelium can form tough, leathery sheets. Woven fibers carried from above might be blended with underground plants to create textiles. Perhaps even insect silk was cultivated, producing threads as strong as those of spiders. In a world where warmth and durability matter more than beauty, clothing would be functional first, symbolic second. Art, surprisingly, is technology too. Carving pigments from minerals, grinding them into powders, mixing them with fat or water to create paint. This is chemistry as much as expression. instruments carved from stone or bone, strings stretched from gut or fibre, drums tuned by the echo of chambers, all represent technological thinking. Underground societies would not abandon beauty. They would refine it, turning their limited resources into expressions of memory and hope. We should not underestimate how creative people can be when pressed. Our ancestors on the surface invented bows, boats and houses, with little more than stone, wood and fibre. Underground, the same minds would face different challenges, but produce equally inventive answers. Darkness does not kill technology, it reshapes it. And if an underground civilization endured long enough, their technology might even surpass ours in certain ways. We rely on abundance. Fields of crops, endless sunlight, oceans of trade. They would rely on precision, careful recycling, total use of every resource, balance maintained without waste. In an age of scarcity, their methods might look wiser than ours. Technology born from darkness would not shine in the same way as ours. It would not rise above the earth in monuments visible for miles. It would whisper through stone, glow faintly in fungi, echo in signals carried through tunnels. It would be humble, invisible, yet no less profound. Because technology is not about how loud or bright it is. It is about how perfectly it fits the needs of its people. And once those technologies existed, once fire was mastered, tools refined, storage secured, and communication steady, the question would naturally arise. Would such a civilization remain content in darkness? Or would their tools one day point upward toward the surface, toward the stars they had never seen? If a civilization was born in darkness, raised among stone walls and silent rivers, the question would eventually emerge, even if only in whispers. Would they ever look upward again? Would they remain content to carve their lives in silence? Or would curiosity, memory and longing push them back toward the surface? For a people who had never seen the sun, it might not be a matter of returning, but of imagining. The surface could be myth as much as geography, a story of a world too vast, too bright, too dangerous to be real. But human beings are not creatures who stay still forever. Something in us always wonders what lies beyond the boundary we know. For the first generations underground, survival would silence these questions, carving homes, securing food, managing fire and water, building rules and traditions. These tasks would consume every thought. But as stability grew, as children were born who knew only stone, the imagination would stir. Songs might emerge about hidden skies, gods of fire rising each day, or a place where water falls from above instead of dripping from rock. These stories would keep alive a sense that there was something beyond the ceiling. Elders, if they remembered the surface, might tell stories of it. But memories warp. What begins as a practical description, trees, rivers, fields of grain, might shift into legend. Trees become pillars of the heavens, rivers become endless snakes of water. The sun becomes not a burning star, but a god whose face cannot be seen. Children raised on such stories might not believe them literally, but they would carry a spark of possibility, a sense that something beyond the stone world exists. Exploration would follow naturally. Humans explore because we must. Even underground, some would wander into uncharted tunnels driven by curiosity as much as by hunger. Some would vanish, swallowed by collapse or predators. Others would return with new chambers, new rivers, or new dangers mapped into memory. And sometimes, just sometimes, one of those tunnels might slope upward, even if blocked, even if faint. The idea of an upward path would become a seed planted in the mind. But upward would not only mean physical direction, it would mean aspiration. And underground people might build myths about upward journeys. Heroes who climb through endless tunnels to reach a world of a light. Ancestors who return to the stars. Perhaps even rituals where young people symbolically ascend chambers, each higher than the last, until they emerge into a chamber filled with firelight meant to mimic the sun. Upward becomes more than a location. It becomes hope. The dangers of the surface would also be feared. If ancestors fled below because of disaster, storms, famine, enemies, the stories of those dangers would echo for centuries. The surface would be painted as a place of chaos where exposure kills and enemies hunt. The underground would be safe, protected, sacred. In such a culture, to dream of upward might even be forbidden. Curiosity could be framed as betrayal. The ceiling becomes not only stone, but law. And yet repression cannot silence imagination forever. Forbidden ideas are often the most tempting. A child who asks what lies above, a singer who weaves songs of light, a dreamer who swears they saw visions of the sun. These voices might be small, but they would not vanish. They would be carried from generation to generation, waiting for a time when survival was stable enough to allow risk. Technology would play a role too. As underground societies grew skilled in carving, preserving, and managing resources, they might eventually gain the means to explore further upward. Tools strong enough to dig, methods to support collapsing shafts, ways to carry air and water farther than before. What begins as myth becomes project. Exploration becomes planned rather than accidental. The psychological pull of the unknown is powerful. We know this from our own history. People have crossed deserts, oceans, and even the void of space, not because they needed to, but because they wanted to know. Underground, the surface would be their cosmos, the unreachable frontier. Even if dangerous, even if unnecessary, some would risk everything for a glimpse. What would happen if they succeeded? Imagine a person who has never seen the sky, standing at the mouth of a cave as dawn breaks. The flood of light would be overwhelming, painful even. Their eyes would close, their skin recoil. But slowly they would adapt, and what they saw would defy every story told underground. The vastness of the horizon, the infinite scatter of stars, the warmth of the sun. It might be terrifying, even maddening, but it would also be revelation. Such a discovery would change everything. The stories told for centuries would suddenly be confirmed or shattered. The elders' authority might be challenged. Religion might splinter, some declaring the surface sacred, others branding it forbidden. Entire communities might divide between those who wish to rise and those who cling to the safety of stone. Upheaval would ripple through every hall. But discovery need not mean abandonment. An underground civilization might treat the surface as another realm, a place visited only for ritual, trade, or vision quests. Young people might be sent upward as a test of courage, returning with stories of sky and stars. The surface could be woven into culture without replacing the underground way of life. Still, once the door is opened, it cannot be fully closed. Even if most people remained below, the knowledge that another world exists above would roar at them. Questions would grow. Why live without sunlight when it is there? Why starve in stone when fields stretch? Across the surface? Hope would become pressure. Pressure would become change. And yet perhaps not all would feel it. Perhaps many would resist, preferring the known to the unknown. The surface may be vast, but it is unpredictable. Storms, predators, enemies, scarcity, these are real risks. Underground is harsh, but it is controlled. People might cling to control rather than gamble on freedom. So the question of whether they would ever look upward again has no simple answer. Some would not, and between them would stretch tension, conflict, and compromise. The story of an underground people would not be a story of one path, but of many. Curiosity and fear, memory and myth, hope and caution, all pulling against one another like threads woven into stone. And if we look at ourselves, we see the same pattern. We live under a sky filled with stars, yet we dream of leaving it for space. Some call it destiny, others call it madness. And still, ships are built, rockets launched, risks taken. Maybe the question of upward is universal. Maybe every people, whether under the sky or beneath the ground, carries the same seed of curiosity. And when we imagine them gazing upward, dreaming of what lies beyond, we also imagine what would happen if they went farther, not just to the surface, but beyond even that. Because once you take one step upward, you begin to wonder how many more there might be. When we picture an underground civilization, we often imagine it as something hidden in the present or waiting to emerge in the future. But what if it was something older than us? What if they were here before us? The idea unsettles because it reshapes the story we tell about ourselves. We like to believe humanity is the first and greatest intelligence on Earth, that our story begins at the surface in open plains under the sun. But what if another story began before ours in silence and darkness, carved into stone long before we walked upright? Our science tells us that civilizations rise with agriculture, that farming fields under the sky gave birth to cities, writing, trade, and culture. But is that the only path? Mushrooms can be cultivated in darkness. Insects and fish can be bred in underground streams. Minerals can be shaped into tools. A people living in caves, if organized and inventive, might have built something we would recognize as civilization long before wheat was planted in fields. If they existed, their traces would be hard to find. Stone preserves little of daily life. Woodrow, fabric decays, fire leaves only ash. Even the walls they carved could be mistaken for natural formations unless we knew how to read them. And if they lived far below, in chambers we have not yet reached, their world could remain untouched for tens of thousands of years. Legends might carry faint echoes, faint myths of hidden realms, forgotten peoples, or wise ancestors who taught us skills we claimed as our own. The stories of Shambhala, Agartha, or the Hollow Earth might not be literal maps, but memories blurred across time. Cultures across the world tell of people who came from below, who emerged from caves or rose from underworlds to shape the surface. Perhaps these stories are not pure imagination. Perhaps they are fragments of encounters with something older. If they came before us, the question is why they vanished. Maybe they did not vanish at all. Maybe they remained underground, content with the stability of their world, while we rose above to claim the surface. Or perhaps disaster struck. Flooding tunnels, poisoned air, collapses that forced survivors to emerge into a world they were not prepared for. Those who made it might have mingled with early humans, passing along fragments of knowledge before their identity dissolved into ours. Imagine if fire-making, tool refinement, or even early myths were not our inventions, but gifts left behind by people of the dark. It is not impossible. Much of what we call progress is shared, borrowed, inherited, and reinvented. If another intelligence lived here before us, their fingerprints might already be hidden within our own culture, invisible because we assume they are ours. Psychologically, the idea challenges us. We're used to being at the top of the story. But if another people existed first, then we are not pioneers, but successors. We're not alone in the story of Earth, but part of a chain, maybe one link in a much longer sequence of rises and falls. It makes us ask whether our dominance is permanent or temporary, whether another intelligence might follow us as we followed them. Science fiction explores this constantly. Stories of ancient civilizations buried beneath planets, ruins holding secrets older than humanity, knowledge waiting in forgotten tunnels. But these are not only stories. Archaeology has shown again and again that history is deeper than we think. Lost cities under sand, civilizations erased by climate shifts, cultures that flourished and vanished long before our textbooks imagined them. If this can happen on the surface, why not below it? The technology of such a people would not resemble ours. It would be adapted to darkness, shaped by necessity. They may have mastered ventilation, water systems, fungal cultivation, and stone carving in ways we cannot match even today. What seems simple to us may have been perfected to a degree that made their lives sustainable for millennia. Survival in such an environment requires discipline, balance, and ingenuity. If they manage that balance, they might have thrived for far longer than our brief 10,000 years of recorded history. And then there is the possibility of contact. If they were here first, did they ever meet us? Perhaps early humans stumbled upon their tunnels, mistook them for gods or spirits, learned from them, feared them. Perhaps stories of dwarves, trolls, or other subterranean beings are memories of real encounters. Exaggeration adds fangs and magic, but beneath the layers of myth could lie something older and stranger, meetings between our ancestors and people who had lived in the dark for ages. The silence of evidence does not erase the possibility. Most of human history is invisible in the record. Most of Earth's history hides more than it reveals. Stone swallows traces, water washes them away, time erases more than it preserves. Absence of proof is not proof of absence, and if they were here before us, it raises another unsettling thought. What if they are still here? Not gone, not vanished, but simply content to remain hidden, deep in places we cannot reach. We like to think we have mapped the Earth, but most of it remains unseen. The oceans of vast mysteries. The crust itself is largely unknown. Entire cave systems stretch for miles, uncharted waiting. It is not impossible that life, even intelligent life, continues in silence where we cannot see. If that were true, what would it mean for us? Would they see us as children, reckless and noisy, squandering resources they preserved carefully? Would they pity us, envy us, fear us, or ignore us? Would they reveal themselves, or choose to watch quietly as they always have? And for us, the revelation that we were not first would shake the foundations of our self-image. Religions would be questioned, science would be humbled, culture would be rewritten. To know that another people shaped this world before us would change how we see ourselves. Perhaps it would make us more cautious, more respectful, or perhaps it would drive us to compete, to prove we are greater. But the truth, if it exists, may never be known. We may never find traces strong enough to prove they were here. The silence of stone may hold its secrets forever. Still, the question matters because it reminds us that history is not a straight line. It is a web of possibilities, some visible, some hidden, and the story of Earth is far longer and stranger than the short span we've lived on its surface. To ask if they were here before us is to ask whether we are unique or only temporary, whether we are the first storytellers or just the latest voices in an older song. And when that question lingers, it naturally leads to another. If they left traces, where might we find them? If they still exist, what signs would betray their presence? If the underground hides the memory of people before us, what evidence could we search for in the cracks and shadows of our world? If we allow ourselves to wonder whether another civilization once lived beneath the surface, or perhaps still does, the next question follows naturally. What signs would they leave behind? What clues might be hidden in our world waiting for us to notice? Stone does not give up its secrets easily, but nothing can exist without leaving some trace. Every fire leaves ash, every tool leaves marks, every voice leaves echoes if you know how to listen. Some of the most obvious places to look are caves themselves, when our own ancestors painted on walls carved symbols or left tools behind. They preserve glimpses of their lives for tens of thousands of years. If another people had lived in similar spaces far earlier or deeper below, they might have done the same. Lines in the stone that look like cracks could, on closer inspection, be deliberate carvings. Chambers that seem natural might have been shaped by hands long forgotten. Sometimes archaeologists already debate whether strange formations are natural or artificial, whether a wall smoothed in the dark is the result of water or of tools. It is possible that some of these arguments are really about traces left by someone else long before us. Artifacts are another possibility, though they would be rare. Stone tools can survive, but they're often overlooked. A chisel, a hammer, or a wedge buried deep in sediment could easily be mistaken for ordinary rock. Unless someone knows exactly what to look for, entire collections of tools could lie unrecognized in caves, mislabeled or ignored. More delicate materials, wood, fabric, bone, would decay. Metal might corrode into nothing. So, we should not expect golden crowns or glowing machines. We should expect subtlety. Scratches on walls, soot in ceilings, small piles of stone arranged too neatly to be chance. Stories themselves are a kind of evidence. Cultures across the world tell of beings who come from below. Some myths speak of ancestors emerging from caves at the beginning of time. Others describe hidden people who taught agriculture, medicine, or metalwork before vanishing again into the ground. We call them myths because we cannot verify them. But myths often preserve echoes of truth. When distant cultures share similar stories, it suggests something more than coincidence. Perhaps these are cultural memories of contact with a people who lived where sunlight never reached. Geological anomalies could be clues as well. Vast tunnel systems exist, some stretching for miles with levels and chambers that look almost too precise to be purely natural. Scientists often explain them with water flow, lava tubes, or erosion. Yet sometimes their symmetry is uncanny, a shaft too straight, a chamber too smooth, a pattern of branching tunnels that looks planned rather than random. If people once carved homes in the deep, erosion may have blurred their work, but hints of design could remain, hidden in plain sight. There are also unexplained artifacts found from where they should be. Reports exist of objects discovered in mines, strange spheres, tools, or carvings buried so deep in rock that they should predate humanity itself. Many of these claims are dismissed as mistakes or hoaxes, and perhaps most are. But even if 1 in 1,000 is real, it suggests we are not the first to shape stone. Biological signs might offer another path. If an underground civilization cultivated fungi, insects, or animals in isolation for thousands of years, traces of those domesticated species might still exist. A mushroom that thrives only in deep caves, an insect that seems oddly adapted to human-like conditions, a fish that shows signs of selective breeding. These could be living fossils of a culture that shaped them long ago. Science might call them anomalies of evolution, but perhaps they are remnants of deliberate human effort in darkness. Architecture is another clue we may already have seen. Some ancient sites on the surface show tunnel systems beneath them. Vast networks of passageways stretch under old temples, cities, or fortresses. Archaeologists usually explain them as storage, escape routes, or water systems. But what if they are older than the structures above? What if ancient builders found tunnels already there and simply built atop them? In that case, some of our oldest monuments may stand on the bones of even older civilizations whose homes lie beneath. Language may hold traces too. Words for underworld, people below, or hidden dwellers appear in many unrelated languages. Symbols carved into rock sometimes resemble eyes, spirals, or stairways leading down. These might not just be metaphors for death or mystery. They might be inherited memories of real people below, encoded into culture long after direct contact faded. We should also consider the possibility of active concealment. If an underground civilization survived into times we recognize, they may have worked to erase their traces. Entrances could be sealed, tools hidden, fires carefully managed to avoid leaving marks. Secrecy itself would be a survival strategy. The fewer signs they left, the safer they were from discovery. If so, the clues we find may not be what they left accidentally, but what they failed to erase completely. Sound might carry hints too. Caves and tunnels often produce strange echoes, whispers, or hums. Geologists explain them as natural resonances, wind currents, or dripping water. But what if some of those sounds are remnants of deliberate design? Tunnels carved to carry voices or signals might still sing their notes long after the people who carved them are gone. Science gives us tools to search, but science also has limits. When archaeologists dig, they often focus on layers that fit their timeline of human history. Anything that does not fit is set aside. Anomalies are often dismissed rather than explored, but the record of the Earth is vast, and perhaps we have only read the surface of the story. So what signs and clues might be hidden in our world? They may be subtle, fragile, or buried too deep for us to find. They may be stories we dismiss, tools we overlook, tunnels we mistake for natural. But the possibility that they exist at all reminds us that history is not finished, that beneath our feet may lie not only stone but memory, not only silence, but evidence of lives as real as ours. And if evidence does exist, it invites another question. Why do these stories continue to capture our imagination even when proof is scarce? Why do we keep searching for hidden worlds for people who may or may not have lived below us? Perhaps the answer lies less in stone and more in ourselves, in the way imagination reaches for mysteries we cannot quite solve, and in the way hidden worlds reflect something about our own. For all the stories of hidden worlds, ancient tunnels, and civilizations that may have thrived beneath our feet, one question lingers. Why does this idea still capture our imagination? Why do we return to it again and again in myths, in books, in films, in quiet conversations at night? There is something in the image of a people living below us that refuses to let go. Part of it is fear. The underground has always carried unease. Caves swallow light. Tunnels close around us. The deeper we go, the more we feel the weight of the earth above pressing down, reminding us how small we are. When we imagine a civilization beneath us, we're not only imagining neighbors, we're imagining being watched from below, our world less secure than it seems. That fear taps into something ancient, the knowledge that predators lurked in caves, that the dark was never truly safe. Stories of hidden people keep that fear alive, reshaped into myth, but fear is only part of it. There is fascination too. The underground is mystery, and mystery pulls at us. A door half open is more compelling than a door wide open. The idea of chambers stretching endlessly below, of entire cities hidden in stone, invites the mind to wonder. What would they look like? What would they eat? What songs would they sing? The unknown is fertile ground for imagination, and the underground is perhaps the greatest unknown of all, existing beneath our everyday steps, unseen but always there. Imagination also loves inversion. We live in light, so we imagine life in dark. We walk under open skies, so we dream of enclosed tunnels. We depend on the sun, so we ask whether life could thrive without it. The underground civilization is the mirror image of ourselves, and in that mirror we see both what we are and what we might be if circumstances had been different. It allows us to ask how flexible life is, how many forms survival could take, how many paths civilization could walk. There's also a sense of humility in these stories. If others were here before us or still live beside us, then we are not alone at the center of history. We're part of something larger, a sequence of lives and worlds that overlap and intertwine. The thought unsettles, but it also fascinates. It reminds us that the story of Earth is bigger than us, that we might not be the final word. These stories also satisfy a longing for hidden depth. In a world where satellites map every street, where images of the planet are only a click away, mystery feels endangered. But the underground resists. We cannot see through stone. Vast cave systems remain unexplored. The idea that something important, something secret might still be there, is comforting in its own way. It means not everything has been discovered, not every question answered. Hidden worlds reassure us that mystery is still alive. Myth keeps them alive as well. Generations have told stories of hidden realms, from Shambhala to Agartha, from the Greek underworld to the Hopi emergence myths. These tales linger because they are retold, reshaped, and embedded into culture. Children hear them and carry them forward. Writers adapt them. Films dramatize them. Every retelling keeps the spark alive. Over time, they become less about proof and more about resonance. We tell them because they feel meaningful, because they say something about our fears, our hopes, and our place in the world. The underground civilization also speaks to a deeper psychological need, the wish that we are not alone. On the surface, loneliness is answered by community. In the cosmos, loneliness is answered by imagining aliens. But beneath us, the loneliness of history is answered by imagining predecessors or neighbors. If another civilization thrived below, then our story is richer, our company larger, our world less empty. The thought fills a silence we otherwise cannot. Another reason lies in the way hidden civilizations reflect our anxieties about ourselves. When we imagine people who live underground, careful with resources, disciplined in survival, we're also imagining what we're not. We waste, we expand without limit, we consume recklessly. The underground civilization is a kind of moral mirror, showing us a version of humanity that learned restraint because it had no choice. The story fascinates because it whispers a lesson. This is how you must live when there is no abundance, but it can also reflect the opposite. Sometimes we imagine underground dwellers as twisted, secretive, or monstrous. They hoard, they deceive, they plot. In those stories, they embody what we fear about ourselves. The parts of humanity that thrive in shadows, the instincts we repress but know are there. In this way, the story is not about them at all. It is about us, our virtues and our vices externalized into a people below. There is also the adventure of it. Stories of hidden worlds promise discovery. Who among us has not wished to stumble upon a hidden door, a forgotten stairway, a cave that leads to something extraordinary? The underground civilization is the ultimate hidden door. It suggests that adventure is not only in distant lands or outer space, but right here under our feet, waiting. And perhaps most of all, these stories endure because they are adaptable. They can be hopeful, fearful, spiritual, or scientific. They can appear in ancient myth or modern fiction. They can be metaphors for death, symbols of the unconscious, or literal speculations about survival in stone. They fit whatever lens we place on them. That flexibility keeps them alive. A story that can only be told one way dies quickly. A story that can be retold in countless ways endures forever. So why does this story still capture our imagination? Because it offers fear, fascination, humility, mystery, comfort, reflection, and adventure all at once. Because it asks us to look beneath the surface of the earth, of ourselves, of history, and wonder what lies hidden. Because it reminds us that no matter how much we discover, there is always more to imagine. And from there, the thought naturally follows. If the story still matters to us, if it still lives in our myths and our imaginations, how do we bring it to a close when we tell it aloud? How do we step back from the dark and gently return to the surface, carrying the wonder without losing the calm? The answer lies in the way we end, not with certainty or proof, but with a soft return, a closing of the tunnel that leaves mystery intact. We have wandered through shadows for a long while, tracing the idea of a civilization born in darkness. A people who might have built homes of stone, cultivated life without sunlight, and carried stories that still echo in our myths. We have followed them through questions of survival, technology, memory, and imagination, always circling around the same wonder. What if the first civilization lived underground? And now, as the story bends toward its end, there is the quiet task of closing the tunnel, of returning gently to the surface without rushing, without breaking the spell, without locking away the mystery too tightly. When we leave a cave in real life, the change is slow. At first, there is only blackness, then a faint shimmer of light, then shadows take shape. The air shifts, carrying scents of soil and grass. Our eyes adjust, and we realize the outside has been waiting all along. Ending this story is like that. We're not shutting a door so much as letting the light seep back in, letting the imagination linger even as we step into familiar ground. The thought of hidden civilizations reminds us of something important about ourselves. We are creatures of curiosity. We dig, we search, we imagine, we create stories where none may exist. And sometimes those stories point us toward truths we had not seen before. Perhaps no civilization ever thrived in eternal night. Perhaps it's only a tale born of fear and fascination. But the act of asking, the act of wondering, is itself valuable. It keeps mystery alive in a world that often feels stripped bare by knowledge. And mystery is not the enemy of science or reason. It is their companion. Every discovery begins as a question, a possibility that sounds impossible until it is not. Once people thought life could not exist in deep oceans without sunlight. Then we found ecosystems thriving on heat and chemicals. Once people thought no city could exist without rivers or fields. Then we built skyscrapers that drink water from pipes and import food from across the globe. Again and again, what we once thought impossible proves only to be unexplored. So when we ask whether civilizations might have lived underground, we're not abandoning reason. We're extending it into the dark, asking it to illuminate places we have not yet looked. There's also something deeply human in imagining life below. The underground is not only a place of fear, it is also shelter. In storms, in wars, in heat and cold, caves have offered protection. Miners descend for work. Archaeologists dig for history. Children crawl into basement during thunder. The underground is part of us, not separate. When we imagine people who never left it, we're imagining an alternate version of ourselves, one that chose to stay in safety, one that built a home where the surface felt too dangerous. The story of hidden civilizations also gives us a way to reflect on our own world. If survival in darkness required balance, restraint, and cooperation, then perhaps the lesson is that we too must learn these things. Our world above is bright and open, but resources are not infinite. The people of the dark, real or imagined, become a mirror, reminding us that endurance is not about endless expansion, but about harmony. Whether they existed or not, their imagined wisdom has value. And yet it is not only lessons we carry from the tunnel, it is also wonder that perhaps somewhere something still waits. Unexplored caves stretch for miles. The Earth's crust is full of silence and secrets. We may never find signs of another civilization, but we will keep searching. If not with shovels, then with stories. Because stories are our way of keeping the unknown alive, of making the dark less empty. Closing the tunnel does not mean sealing it. It means stepping back, allowing it to remain open in our minds. Perhaps tomorrow someone will read an old myth differently, or notice carvings on a cave wall that look too deliberate, or wonder why certain tunnels are too straight to be natural. Perhaps one day science will stumble upon something that shifts the story from imagination to evidence. Or perhaps it will never happen, and that is all right too. Sometimes the value of a story is not in its proof, but in its persistence. So here, as the story winds down, it is time to return gently to the surface. The air grows warmer, the shadows grow thinner, the steps echo less and less until they vanish altogether. The ceiling lifts and sky returns. The imagination does not close, but follows us whispering in the back of the mind, reminding us that mystery is never fully gone. Thank you for walking through this journey, for sitting with the questions rather than rushing for answers, for letting the dark breathe and the silence speak. If you found comfort in the exploration, if you enjoyed the calm of it, consider staying with this community. For returning for more reflections like this one, and as always, wherever you are, whatever time it is for you, may you find rest. May you carry a little wonder with you, and may the questions linger just enough to make tomorrow feel a little more mysterious than today.